Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to sleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you from and what time are you watching? Feel free and relax. I still remember the first night I heard a noise upstairs, right after I moved into this old building with thick brick walls and wooden windows, creak when the wind blew. I was lying in bed, half awake and half asleep, then the sound of a heavy object rubbing on the floor above made me sit up. To be frank, it was very loud, my heart was pounding immediately. I tried to brush it off as normal apartment noise but it didn't stop. I heard long, steady footsteps going from one side of the apartment to the other. They were very heavy and made my ceiling shake. I felt my bed shake a little, my stomach tighten. I told myself it was just a new neighbor moving things or rearranging things late at night, but deep down inside, I felt like something was wrong. It was too rhythmic, almost like there was a path to follow. Live on the third floor of a 4-story building. My apartment is small with one bedroom, narrow living room and old wooden windows that slam shut if you don't secure them with wedges. The building is famous for its outdated construction. People say the walls are so thick you can barely hear the neighbor's TV, but somehow I can hear every bump, scrape and footstep from the apartment above. The first time I heard it I didn't think much of it other than a slight annoyance, but the noise continued every night around 11 o'clock. Sometimes it sounded like furniture was being dragged across the floor. Other times I heard something like someone dropping something heavy, then a dull thud through the ceiling. In the morning I saw my neighbor from upstairs getting into the elevator, wearing a suit, looking like a normal office worker, tired face, simple hairstyle, always in a hurry. Out the door I tried to catch the light his eyes to greet him. Sometimes he nods, mumbles a polite hello, but never more than that. We rarely cross paths because I work from home and he leaves early. When he comes back it's usually late. I used to wonder if he heard my TV or if I was disturbing him with my own noise, but then I remember how thick these walls are. We're lucky if we can hear each other, except I hear everything from upstairs every night. I wait for the clock to strike 11. I don't know why it happens at that particular time, but it has happened. As soon as I realize it's almost that time, I feel a little tightness in my chest. I'll be lying on the couch, maybe scrolling on my phone or watching a show, but my concentration will be lost. I can't focus on anything because I know what's coming, and then like clockwork I hear those slow footsteps, heavy, one after another. Sometimes they stop for a few seconds, then I hear the distinct sound of something dragging across the floor. It reminds me of a table or chair being pushed around. There is a light scratching sound, then another series of thumps shaking the ceiling light. By then I am fully awake. My heart is beating faster than normal. My palms are a little damp. I tell myself to ignore it. Maybe the guy upstairs is just restless, maybe he has insomnia, or he likes to rearrange things at night, but the noise is inconsistent with normal activity. It is too deliberate. It will last for about an hour plus or minus, then it will stop as suddenly as it started. When it stopped I lie there in bed waiting for another scratching or stomping. Sometimes I fall asleep, only to be startled awake by another noise. It feels like I am living in a loop. Day quiet, night brings morning, noise back to normal. One night I get fed up. I decide go upstairs and knock on his door. It was around midnight. I was in my pajamas, but I wore shoes and had a flashlight because the hallway lights in this building tend to flicker. When I walked out of my apartment the hallway was silent. I could hear a faint buzz from the fluorescent lights but nothing else. No footsteps above, no scraping, no dragging. It felt like I had stepped into a vacuum. I hesitated at the elevator wondering if I should turn back, but I was so excited I pressed the button and went up a floor. The door slid open. The hallway was empty, no lights under the door, no sound, no movement, nothing at all. I approached his apartment and knocked lightly, then I knocked harder. No answer. I listened carefully. I couldn't hear breathing or even a radio. After a minute I gave up and turned back. My eyes widened. I felt a cold sensation on the back of my neck. I checked the time, 11:20. I tried to talk to a few of my floor neighbors, but no one else seemed to hear anything. Some told me they slept with earplugs, others said they never heard the noise. Our building manager, the director, shrugged and told me the walls were thick and maybe I had some beams or shared pipes that were transmitting the noise from another part of the structure. He suggested I just ignore it, which is what I tried to do for a while. Then about 3 weeks ago I noticed something strange I hadn't seen the guy upstairs for days. I assumed he was on a business trip, but the noise at 11, continued. It was as loud as ever, furniture scraping, footsteps, spic banging. A few nights later I decided to stay up and watch a movie until I heard the sound start. As soon as it started I ran out into the hallway to confirm. The hallway was quiet and still, no strange noises, no echo of movement. I went back inside. The noise continued above me like clockwork. One morning I ran into the building manager in the lobby. He asked me if I had any contact info for the guy on the 4th floor. I said I didn't. He told me that the guy had moved out a few weeks ago, maybe even a month. I felt my stomach drop when he said that. I told him I had just heard noises coming from that apartment the night before. He said that was impossible because the apartment was empty and the keys had been returned. I kept quiet after that because I didn't want to appear paranoid, but inside I felt a tightness in my chest that lasted the rest of the day. The noise came back at the usual time. I sat in the armchair staring at the ceiling, my hands shake a little. The floor above me creaked with heavy footsteps. It sounded like 2 or 3 steps, but it could have been just one. People moving around. The scratching started again. The furniture on my ceiling was shaking. I could see dust coming down from the corners of my mouth was dry. I wanted to run upstairs, but I felt a strange sense of dread. This place was supposed to be deserted, but I heard the noise clearly above me. I tried calling the manager on his cell phone, but he didn't pick up. I walked around the living room and heard a steady footstep above me. I considered calling the police, but I didn't have enough information to rely on except strange noises in an empty apartment. My mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe someone was occupying it, maybe a homeless person found a way in, or perhaps a contractor was using the space without permission. But why did they only show up at 11 at night? Why would they drag furniture around the next day? I convinced myself I should do something more direct. I waited until the afternoon. When the noise never came, I took the elevator up and tried. The door was locked. I put my ear to the door. I didn't hear anything. I checked the hallway window, looked around for any sign of forced entry, but everything seemed normal. The door was dusty. The doorknob was cold. I stood there for a while feeling a strange unease in the pit of my stomach. I finally went downstairs and tried to do my thing that evening. I got home from running errands around 7 a.m. I cooked a quick dinner, tried to watch some TV to calm down. By 10:30 I was on edge. My heart was racing and I hadn't even heard a sound. I was jumping into the creaks in my apartment. When the clock read 10:55, I turned off all the lights. I sat in the dark on the couch, listening. At exactly 11:01, I heard the first bang. It was right above my kitchen area. Then the second bang in the living room ceiling. Methodical footsteps. My breathing became shallow and I felt my chest tighten. I quietly walked to the front door, opened it. Just a small yelp, and listened in the hallway. The hallway was silent, not a sound. I turned around and closed the door. Footsteps and the scratching continued. Above, I turned on the flashlight on my phone and looked up at the ceiling. Paint chips were peeling around the corners. Every time there was a loud noise, I could feel the vibrations under my feet as if the whole building was transmitting that movement down to me. Then I heard a long scratching sound like furniture being dragged the entire length of the apartment. My skin was rashy and covered in goosebumps. My heart was pounding so hard I felt pressure in my ears. At that moment I started talking loudly to myself. I said things like, "This isn't happening." That apartment was empty, but the noise continued. The tension in my body turned into a constant pain in my shoulder. I ignored it. I grabbed my keys and my phone and rushed out into the hallway and up the stairs to the 4th floor. I stopped right outside the door. My hands were shaking as I reached for the doorknob. I tried the lock. I pressed my ear to the wood. It felt cold and lifeless. No sound from the other side. I stood there breathing heavily. My mind was buzzing with confusion. If anyone was there I would hear they, but the hallway was quiet. Only a faint hum from the overhead lights. After a few seconds of silence listening, I turned and walked back up the stairs. My phone flashlight caught the dust particles in the air. I went down to my apartment, closed the door and locked it. The noise continued as soon as I sat down on the couch. I couldn't make sense of it. It was like the sound was sealed and that space could only be heard from my apartment. The next day I told the manager everything. He repeated that the apartment was empty. The previous tenant had moved out and that no one else had a key. He said it could be old plumbing or some pipes that were open at night. That didn't make sense to me. I knew the difference between creaking pipes and actual footsteps. We argued for a while, but he shrugged and said he didn't know anything. If he didn't tell me. I felt frustrated and confused. I started sleeping in the living room with the TV on, hoping it would cover the noise, but it didn't help much. The sound of footsteps and the shuffling sound go through my ceiling at the same intensity every night. Sometimes it freaks me out so much I have to go out and Walk around the block until I feel calmer, but when I come back the noise is still there. My anxiety is starting to affect my appetite. I skipped meals because my stomach was in knots. One night the shuffling sound got worse. It lasted for an hour. It kept scraping from one end of the apartment to the other. My ceiling light shook slightly with each vibration. I was sure something was about to burst. My chest felt tight and my forehead became clammy. I kept checking the time, pacing back and forth in the living room. I held the phone ready to call someone, but I didn't know the person. My hands were shaking and I could feel my pulse in my neck. Around midnight the scratching stopped, the footsteps slowed down and then disappeared. I sat on the floor exhausted. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was imagining things, but my ears don't lie. I could feel the vibrations. The next day I thought about trying to contact the owner of the apartment, but I had no idea who it was. The manager wouldn't give me any personal details. He probably thought I was a nuisance. At the time I even considered breaking in just to prove to myself no one was there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Now I sit here every night waiting for the noises to start. They always do the same. The neighbors are gone, the apartment is still empty, but the footsteps and the shuffling of things keeps going on and on. I feel trapped. Part of me wanted to go upstairs and break the lock and see what was inside. Died. Another part of me thought it was a bad idea. Maybe it was better not to know. Maybe I should just pretend not to hear, see nothing but the noises that haven't subsided. If anything, they're getting more frequent some nights. They start earlier, around 10:30, and last until midnight. I can't sleep, I can't think straight. I feel my pulse pounding in my temples every time I hear the first click of a thumb. In the morning, I wake up with dark circles under my eyes and a sharp pain in my chest. I haven't told my friends because I don't want them to think I'm losing my mind, but I can't live in denial forever. I wonder if I should pack up and move. This building is old and the rent is cheap, but it's not worth the stress. Moving is still expensive. I don't have any money right now, so I stay here night after night, listening to something that shouldn't be happening. It's 10:55, I'm hunched over the kitchen table, typing this because I need to vent. I've been bracing myself for this sound. My hands are shaking a little. I keep swallowing because my throat feels dry. The window next to me shakes with a slight breeze, but it doesn't hide the sound that's about to start. I look up at the ceiling and my stomach churns. There's a faint rivulet right on time. My heart rate picks up. I can hear a slow, steady footstep from above, then another. My ceiling light shivering. I feel my chest tighten. The scratching starts and it echoes throughout my apartment. I put my hands over my ears, but it doesn't help. The sound goes straight through me. My lungs feel strangled. My mind is racing. My back is cold and sweaty. I don't know what's making these noises. I don't know if it's a person or something else, or if I'm just hearing some weird quirk of this old building, but it's real. I feel it in my bones and I can't decide what to do. Should I go upstairs and see for myself? Should I open the door? Should I risk looking like a crazy person to the director, or should I carry on, pretend I don't hear these late night movements? Right now, heavy and constant footsteps. My ceiling creaks under the weight of each footstep. The scratching is louder than ever. My ears are ringing. I'm tired and I'm scared. Scared. I have no proof, but I know there's something up there, something moving furniture around and pacing back and forth in the empty apartment. The manager says it's empty. It's supposed to be empty, but I can hear the noise clear as day and they won't stop. I guess that's my story so far. No one's been hurt. No one else has reported anything. I'm alone in this and I'm losing sleep. I can't go on living with these nightly visits, but I also can't face whatever is upstairs, at least not yet. I'll just sit here, hands shaking, teeth gritted, listening to the steady footsteps above me in that locked, empty apartment. Maybe tomorrow I'll do something about it, or maybe I won't. I really don't know, but this is my life right now and I can't pretend it isn't happening. All I can do is sit here night after night waiting for the first noise at 11 o'clock and on and on. I still remember the first moment I heard footsteps echoing in a place that should have been empty. My name is Mark. I worked as a security guard a building materials warehouse located in a run-down industrial estate on the outskirts of town. I had a routine that usually consisted of walking around the perimeter, checking the fence and making sure the gate was locked. Most nights nothing happened. I filled in a diary, noting any small events, and waited for my shift to end. That's how things went for the first few months. Everything was quiet and predictable. The isolation never bothered me. I didn't pee gate post, looking at the distant lights of the nearby factories and feeling comfortable in my own space. But one night everything changed. Now I don't feel comfortable starting my shift. I feel stressed. I arrive at the warehouse around 10 p.m. The outside lights are dim enough to see Main gate and part of the parking lot yard is mostly gravel and concrete slabs. Large building with metal walls and high ceilings. Trucks come in during the day, but after 6 p.m. the place gets quiet. There is a small office at the front where I keep my stuff, a thermos of water, coffee, a flashlight, and a control panel that displays the camera feeds. A no-frills security system. We have a few cameras located near the dock and along a few of the hallways. Inside I can see them on a small black and white screen. The sensors pick up motion, and if they detect anything they create a bright spot on the screen. In normal conditions I only see small spots when a cat wild wandering in or if a sheet of plastic flapping in the wind near an open window, but lately those spots have started to feel ominous. The first time I heard footsteps was around 2 a.m. I was sitting on a metal stool inside the office. I had the door open as it was stuffy in there, especially on warmer nights. Inside the main warehouse was dark, but there was a long corridor leading from the office area to a series of storage rooms. It was a drab space with concrete floors and walls lined with shelves full of spare parts and boxes of bricks. I heard footsteps coming from that corridor, clear and regular. At first I thought it might be water dripping on a loose board or maybe some machinery expanding or contracting, but it didn't sound random. It was a series of footsteps as if someone was walking slowly. I stood up and picked up the flashlight. My stomach tightened. I felt a sudden cold sweat on the back of my neck. I told myself it could be a thief looking for copper wire or tools to steal, which wasn't unusual around here. So I walked out of the office and turned on the flashlight. The dark corridor, my headlight cut across the stacks of pallets showing dust floating in the air. I moved slowly, eyes staring into the distance. The footsteps stop. As soon as I get close I call out, "Is anyone there?" I get no answer. I expect maybe the sound of someone running away or a shadow quickly darting behind a shelf, but nothing. The place is silent except the faint hum of a distant noise. The light bulb. My hands are sweaty. I feel the grip of the flashlight become slippery. After a few seconds I walk further into the hallway, checking behind the boxes and looking under the shelves. I see no one. My heart is pounding and I feel my breathing is louder than usual. I go back to the office and check the cameras. The display flashes on one of the sensors, but only for a split second. No clear shape, just a quick blur, then nothing. I stare at the screen for a few minutes waiting to see if anyone can back to the sensor line. The last one is still flat. I assume it is my imagination or maybe just a weird echo, but I can't get rid of it, the feeling that something was wrong. The second time it happened was a few nights later. At the same time I was walking around the perimeter. As usual I checked the fence, walking behind the loading dock and back to the front office. As I entered the warehouse I heard a noise like a light scratching on concrete like skates. For a second I stopped. I listened closely, then the footsteps started. They got heavier, time like boots. I turned quickly and shined the flashlight at the end of the hallway. That's when I saw a dark figure. It stood still facing me. I couldn't see a face, just a shadow. I stopped breathing for a second. I expected it to run or scream. It didn't do anything. It just stood there motionless. My heart was pounding, my arms were numb. I wanted to call out, but my throat tightened. I forced myself to say, "Hey." My voice echoed. The figure didn't move. I stepped forward, shining the light directly at it. The shape seemed to flicker as if the edges weren't stable. I blinked and moved the beam around trying to focus. Then I stepped back closer, maybe 10 steps. When I got there it disappeared. Nothing but empty space. I circled around the area. I checked every corner. I looked behind the stacks of boxes. I couldn't find anyone. I felt a shiver in my arms like I was freezing. Even though the inside of the warehouse wasn't cold, I was about to run out and call the police, but what was I supposed to say when I saw a shadow in the office? I checked the camera recording. I just saw a series of short flashes. The motion sensors turned on in succession as if something was passing quickly in front of them, but I never got a clear picture. It just looked like static. It didn't make sense. I know what animals look like on these cameras. They don't trigger each sensor in this perfect sequence. Made me replay the footage several times, but it didn't help me understand it. For the rest of my shift, I remained vigilant. I walked around more often, expecting to find signs of a break-in. I checked all the locks on the doors leading to the yard. Everything was safe. As the sun began to rise, my nerves were damaged after that night. I couldn't relax during each shift. I felt like something was watching me. I started to hear faint sounds, tapping on metal shelves, scraping along the walls, and those footsteps, sometimes they were very light, almost like bare feet on concrete. Sometimes they were louder, like heavy boots. I started to get scared when I left the office. Even stepping out onto the main floor felt dangerous. I would hold a flashlight and scan every corner. I checked behind pallets and crates, expecting someone To jump out, no one ever did that. No signs of a break-in, no items missing, no day workers reported anything unusual. I mentioned these noises to one of the foremen, but he just shrugged and said the place was old. He told me not to worry about it eventually. I stopped talking to the staff about it because they treated it like a big joke. They would say things like "watch out for ghosts" and laugh. I didn't think it was funny. I tried to keep track of the times I heard footsteps or saw flashes on the camera. Nothing clear pattern. Sometimes it happened close to midnight, other times after 3 a.m. Sometimes I worked a whole shift without being disturbed, but that rarely happens. I started having trouble sleeping during the day. My routine was broken because I kept waking up and remembering it was still dark. Imagine one night I decided to walk around the Ayer warehouse every hour on the hour. I wanted to prove to myself that it was just me being nervous, so at 11 p.m. I scanned the whole place. I checked the storage rooms, loading docks and hallways. I recorded everything. Nothing unusual. At midnight I repeated the process. Was fine until 1 a.m. I felt more relaxed. I thought if I kept busy maybe I wouldn't have imagined things. Then around 1:30 a.m. I was sitting in my office. I saw the light on the camera feed flashing. It jumped from camera 1 to camera 3 in a few seconds, which meant something was moving from the south entrance near the loading dock straight to the main hallway without passing in front of camera 2. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside. I could feel pulse in temple, my hand shaking. I walk into the hallway and immediately hear something moving near the corner. It sounds like a quick shuffle. I rush to the corner and shine my flashlight around. I catch a glimpse of what looks like a shoulder or part of a back. A shape turns into the next hallway. It's not a cat or a reflection, looks like a person. I run forward. My shoes hit the concrete hard. The beams above me rattle with every step. As I turn the corner I don't see anyone, just a dead end with some stacked plywood and metal pipes. No exit, nowhere to go. I walk around the stacks of wood expecting to corner someone. There's no one there. I feel my stomach tighten. My breathing is rapid and my legs are weak. I try to steady myself by leaning against a stack of plywood. My flashlight vibrates. I listen for any sound, but all I hear is my own breathing. No explanation for how someone could disappear into thin air that time. That's when I realized I was really scared. I wasn't just in a state of stress anymore. I felt a deep physical fear. My arms were tingling and I wanted to quit, but I needed the job. I wasn't really rich and I couldn't quit without notice, so I swallowed that feeling and stayed until morning. I didn't tell anyone about this particular incident because I knew they wouldn't believe me. They would think I was crazy or lying. For the next few weeks it got worse. The footsteps came more often. At night I still feel it. I patrol, I check the cameras and I wait. It doesn't hurt me physically and I haven't seen any evidence of a break-in or theft, but the tension is constant. The footsteps keep echoing in the hallways that should be empty, and every time I rush to it with a flashlight I only see darkness and silence. I leave in the morning with stiff shoulders and a headache. I come back the next night hoping it will be quiet this time, but it never is. The presence is always there, just out of sight, reminding me I am not alone in this empty warehouse. And it is the story. I hear it, I see it in flashes, I feel it every time I walk through those doors. It never speaks, never shows its face, never does anything except make me doubt my sanity, but it is there and I can't ignore it, so I keep showing up. Flashlight in hand, trying to do my job. It is my life right now and that's all I know. I always thought my evening runs were my comfort zone. I never expected them to become a source of stress after work. I usually take the loop route around this neighborhood and pass an old textile mill. It's defunct and pretty quiet. There's a fence around it, some rusty signs, broken windows here and there, and no signs of life inside. It's always dark. The street lights on that stretch of road are either too dark or completely off. It's hard to see more than a few meters at night, but I like it because it's quiet, less people around, less traffic, and no one bothers me when I'm just trying to clear my head after a long day. That used to be my favorite part of running until a few weeks ago. One night I felt off. For the first time I remember feeling like I wasn't alone. I was jogging, listening to my own breathing, trying to keep a steady pace, my footsteps echoing on the pavement. Usually that's the only noise I hear besides the wind, but that night I kept thinking I heard a pair of footsteps. It was faint and I didn't know if it was my imagination. At first something made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe it was an echo or maybe a car a block away. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. My shoulders tightened and my jaw tightened. I felt a heavy pressure in my stomach as if I had swallowed a stone. I decided to stop. I stopped, turned around and looked around the street. Nothing. The street was deserted. A few street lights were flickering. The fence around the factory looked the same as always. the rusty chain had some barbed wire on top. I couldn't see anything moving in the darkness. My heart was beating faster than usual, my breathing became irregular after a minute of standing there. I shook my head, chuckled to myself and kept running. Nothing happened that night. When I got home I felt silly. I showered, ate a light dinner and tried not to think about that. A few days later, I was walking the same route again. I passed the factory again. The feeling of being followed came back, this time more intense. My pulse pounded as soon as I turned. The road that led past that building, the sidewalk on that block was cracked and there was usually some trash in the gutter. I heard my footsteps hitting the ground, but again I swore I heard another set of footsteps behind me. The noise stopped whenever I slowed down. I turned back a few times. Each time no one was there. It was quiet and I still felt my throat tighten. There was a chill at the back of my neck even though it wasn't a cold night. My hands were sweaty so I wiped them on my shorts and tried to speed up, just wanting to get out of that stretch. The next day I couldn't stop thinking about that factory in my head while I was working. I kept picturing it while typing emails. I couldn't tell if I was scaring myself for no reason or if there was something more to it that night. I ran after it again, same route. I was determined not to let my imagination get the better of me, but that feeling came back as soon as I stepped onto the factory block that appeared on my right. The tall windows were mostly broken or boarded up. Some graffiti on the walls was not clearly visible. The lights inside me moved along the sidewalk at a faster pace. My eyes scanned left and right. A feeling of unease weighed on me. My legs felt heavier than usual. My breathing was shallow. I found myself constantly glancing back. Still no one there. After a few more nights I was fed up. Paranoia. I decided to check around the grounds. I climbed up on a concrete block next to the fence to see if I could see into the yard. I expected to see the usual debris, broken pallets, maybe some rusted machinery. Instead, I saw a flash of light inside the main building. It was a short flash, as if someone turned on a flashlight or some kind of small light. As soon as I saw it my chest tightened. There was no reason for anyone to be there at that time of night. This place was supposed to be abandoned. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I screamed on reflex. I had no plan. I just felt a rush of adrenaline and wanted answers. The lights went out immediately, then silence, no movement. I listened for footsteps or doors opening. Nothing. I felt my skin tingle. My heart was beating fast. I realized I was holding on to the top of the fence too tightly. My knuckles hurt. After a minute I jumped down to the sidewalk and stood there not knowing what to do. Finally I backed up and went back to running, but my mind was racing. If there was someone inside they must have heard me. Why didn't they react? The next day I went to see a security guard who worked a block away near a small office building. He usually went out in the evenings to patrol the area. I asked him casually if he had ever seen anyone around the old textile mill. He looked at me with a confused look. He said that the place had been closed for years, no electricity, no staff, nothing. He even said that the property owner had trouble keeping out intruders in the beginning, but that was over a decade ago. Now it was obvious that no one bothered with the building. They had padlocks, all that. He shrugged and said that maybe some vagabonds had snuck in, but he himself hadn't seen anything or anyone suspicious. He told me that everything was quiet as far as I knew. I felt thank him and leave, but I feel uncomfortable. The factory is not quiet for me that evening. I stand at the top of the block facing the building from a distance. It is about 9 p.m. Slightly cooler than usual. I could see the broken windows on the second floor reflecting a bit of the moonlight. I waited a few minutes just staring. Nothing moved, no lights inside. My stomach tensed and I almost didn't want to run through it, but I forced myself to run. Running started normally. My shoes crunched on the sidewalk. A stray cat ran across the street. The tall building next to me was silent. Then the presence returned. It felt like someone was behind me. Eyes locked on my back. I stopped. I turned around. Nothing but the dark street. My breath was shaky as I exhaled. I felt my arms tingling like my body was preparing to fight or run. I stood there for a moment scanning every corner, then I continued walking a little faster than usual. I couldn't get the factory out of my head. A few nights later I decided I would investigate more thoroughly. I didn't intend to break in or anything. I just wanted to look around the yard one more time, maybe looking through the window. So I brought a small flashlight, dressed in dark clothes, and tried to keep my steps as light as possible. Around 10 o'clock I reached the fence. It was dark, no sign of anyone around. I looked for a gap or a loose part that I could eventually get under. I found a part of the fence where the chain link looked cut or pried open near the bottom. I crouched and carefully slid inside, hoping no one would see. The yard was full of old Barrels, rusted metal bars and weeds growing through the cracked sidewalk. It smelled like dust in damp soil. The wind blew through some plastic sheets stacked on the wall, making a faint rattling sound. I moved slowly, shining the flashlight around to see if there were footprints or new tire tracks. I didn't notice any. My mouth was dry. I kept swallowing but my throat tightened. I walked closer to the main building. The doors were boarded up with thick boards. I checked a small side door near what looked like the loading area. It was locked with a heavy chain. Unfortunately, I looked through a gap between the boards. It was dark inside. A stench was coming out, old wood and maybe mold. I whispered, "Hello, anyone here?" I don't know why I expected an answer. My voice echoed a little in the emptiness. Nothing responded. I felt my heart pounding as I moved around the side of the building looking for a second entrance or maybe a broken window. On the ground floor I found a small window with broken glass near the corner. It was just big enough to see through me. Engin den pin veo trong va thay emoticon fong day and hung kubui bam va thiet by siu, near Thursday doak fu bang vi hok nua, te twa hoi run, twa siu tuong ra emoti bong nua buk veo chung den pin, twa nin tho va lang ne, luk dao twa chi ne thay tiang tim min dap trong tai, sao du twa ne thay tiang sao ne tu sao ben trong namai. Du la tiang dong bat thuang ne nu the ko Thursday gi du dang by kio cham, twa kong beat chin zak no fat ra tu dao and hung no keen tone than twat song tang. Tok tren kan te dung dung, twa cam thay, mot jiat mo hoi lan dang che tren tran, twa dung du, dong kung, chiu den pin theo mo hong kwa ki ho. Ko gang nin chien dong and hung chum sang chi cho thay kung mot vat the va bong toi bui bam, emoticon so high ap den voi twa hin dung ra ko ai du an nup trong bong toi, theo doi twa. De ken nak goi kan sat and hung twa kong ko ly du cu the nao nagwai mot tiang dong la, twa kung kong muon jai tik ly du tai sa min li xam fam tai san riang, mok dap kwa twa dap ratenhan. Twa kodane thay tiang dap thin tik trong tai, twa buk min phi lui lai, twa dung du, emotiluk. Twa dang quet mat cap san de tim bat ky dao huanao qua su song van kong ko gi kong ko buk chan kong ko on sang and hung na mai ko ve by chiem dong cam giak nu ko ai du dang cho ben trong twa. Quiet din roi di ko the twa cam thay run ray tom tri twa dang tre qua and hung tin hung za na twa com nuoi soang va truat arenagwai qua hung rao mo tre tim twa van dap lone xa twa roi koi ku dat bam sat bong toi ko gang kong by bat ky nuoi qua duong he nan veen bao vi now min thay kai den fo chin twa che bo vi na sut chung duong twa lin tu sinagwai li nin twa cam thay. By foi by trong tuan tip theo twa tran che qua na mai twa chan mot twen duong dai han qua mot ku vuk sang sua han qua ti tran and hung moi dam nai kai vi den na, twa li thay min dang gi vnoi du twa tu hoi lu den ko sang tro li kong he lu ko ai du dang lam gi ben trong kong chua moi beat. Koi kung su to ma qua twa de chien tang va twa quay lai twen duong thuang lu qua min lon nai la som han mot chut veo bui toi koang 8 o'clock toi. Twa gi ko lu twa ko the din gang qua ma kong cam thay qua so high, duong fo van vang tan nu moi kai and hung chua toi den nu muc, twa che cham rai. Quet toa na kong ko den ben trong kong ko chien dong now trong san. Suit song tang trong long nguk twa van con du mak du dang seat chat twa, hua de di doak nua duong ti ne thay tiang kim lo iva veo bitong, no fat ra tu fia sao hong rao namai, twa dung lai nai lap tuc, adrenaline dang trail, hua de kan nak den vikbo che and hung ko du gi du keen twa buk len hong rao emotilan nua va min veo sam. Noi duok chiu sang mo not boi and hung tia sang koi kung qua ban gay, twa thay mot. Bong nuoi gon qua hong, trong jong nu mot nuoi dang kong nuoi, tim twa dap thin tik, twa din goi. En hung truok kai twa kip, ho de di chien veo ben trong qua hong, kan qua ma twa gi la de dong chat, han la mo, bang catch now du, bong nuoi du de en han chong len vale, sao du san van en lang, ban nong qua toi dang het len bao toi roi di en hung toi van dung du, dung chan tai cho, ko gang su ly en hung gi toi vo nin thay, toi. Chik chan du la mot nuoi chu kong fi emoticon bat he mot tsai bong ngao nin, bung toi quan lai, toi cam thay mo hoi che suang gai, koi kung toi kung lui lai vi kong muon gay su chu y kong muon doi dao voi bat kyaio du toi bat dao che lai doi chan toi nu chi toi siu. Leak nin lai cho den kai na mai quat koi tam mat du la lon koi kung toi ko gang duo tra sao du toi tu nu min the di theo mot tuen duong en ton han en hung moi dem toi van cam they thoi tuk muon di qua va zem ko du gi moi zara kong toi siu gi vetsa. On sang hin bong va en hung tiang dong ky la ko Thursday gi du Thursday gi du kong muon by nin they mac du toi kong ko nim vu phi tim ra no en hung toi van chualin lak voi chin gwin fan trong toi cam thay toi loi vida de no yen en hung toi kong de su ly doak noi so high ap den voi toi moi kai toi den. Gon noi du nen bai geo toi che theo emoticon duong kok noi du dong duk han mu fuang tien han mu nuoi han vi bong toi han doi kai toi van cam thay bon chan tu hoi lu min ko by theo doi kong in Hong Kong ko gi du doi nu tren don duong vang vi ga na mai det siu toi kong the quain and hung gi min de thay nai ca. Nu toi kong bao geo nan doak loi jai tik ro rang nu ko ai du quiet din kim tra no toi hai vong ho de san sang cho su sang tang gotten get tuong tu noi du by qua vmotly du now du hok ko the chi la noi du vang vi va ai du ko ly du riang da len veo ben trong bat kutruong hop now toi de zong vik che bo bui toi qua min doak cho la de dao o si toi ten tau va toi kong the lam du du nu toi lo. Lang vi en hung gi en nup trong toa na bo hong du doi kai toi van nin thay namai kai. Lai xin gang qua veo ban gay trong no vo hai duyan mat troi chi la mot tsong trin cu ky voi en hung o qua so by vo va. The doors were boarded up but at night it changed and I knew there was more to it than met the eye. For now I'll stop there. I had no evidence of anything supernatural or criminal but I had no doubt there was a presence there. My gut had told me many times that something was wrong and that's why I never went near the place again. I still remember the exact moment it all started. It was right around lunchtime on a Tuesday. The office was quiet and the fluorescent lights made everything look a little bright. Most people were still out probably chatting in the break room or making coffee in the hallway. I was sitting at my desk in my cubicle staring at a spreadsheet. It was starting to give me a headache. The day seemed normal but there was something wrong in the background. At first I couldn't place it, then I realized I felt uncomfortable. It was as if someone else was in the room with me. I glanced around and saw no one. The hallway was empty. The only sound was a buzzing, the hum of the air conditioner and the faint hum of the overhead light. I tried to ignore the feeling and continued working on the spreadsheet. My eyes became heavy with the afternoon drowsiness that was setting in. Suddenly I heard a slight scraping sound. It sounded like my chair was moving backwards on the thin office carpet. I stopped and looked down. The chair was actually moving inch by inch away from my desk. It wasn't a big movement but it was steady and unnatural. There was no wind and the air conditioner had never pushed my chair like that before. I remember my heart rate skyrocketing and my palms feeling clammy. I didn't flinch or make a sound. I just stared at that chair until, finally, it stopped. I didn't see anyone. I didn't see anything that could explain what I had just witnessed. For a few seconds, I just sat there. My mind was spinning. But I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. There had to be. Maybe the wheels are out of balance, maybe the floor is uneven, but I know that chair, I've had it for months and it never moves on its own. I reach out and pull it back under the desk. My hand is shaking a little but I try to brush it off. I think part of me doesn't want to deal with anything weird. At that hour I want to finish my spreadsheet and get home on time. I tell myself that stress is teasing me. I get up to see if anyone is playing a prank on me. I check the boxes next to me but there's no one around. A few desks have personal items like Family photos or stress balls, but the computers are off and the chairs are empty. The hallway is empty. I listen for footsteps or any sign that a coworker might be hiding, but everything is quiet except for the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. After a minute I go back to my desk feeling restless. I try to push it behind my head for the rest of the day. The day passed without incident. I left the office feeling a little off, but I thought maybe I was just tired. The next day I came in the morning and everything seemed normal. My chair was still where I left my computer. When I shut it down I clocked in, opened up a spreadsheet and started my routine. I even laughed about the incident, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But around mid-afternoon something else happened. I was typing an email to a client when suddenly I heard a faint clicking sound like someone was clicking a mouse very quickly. The noise was coming from a cell 2 rows behind me. I knew that station was rarely used and the computer there was supposed to be turned off. I stopped typing and heard the clicking sound continued for maybe 5 seconds, then stopped. I got up and walked over to the dark screen. The tower under the desk was off, no lights or fans. The mouse was on the touchpad motionless. I stared at it for a while. The hairs on my arms stood up. I even picked up the mouse and clicked a few times to see if it was a residual charge or something. It didn't do anything. The whole system was definitely off. After that I started paying more attention to strange noises. That wasn't the last time I heard clicking on unused stations. For the next week I occasionally heard keyboard tapping or rapid mouse clicking in the corners of the office, which was clearly unoccupied. Every time I got up and checked, and each time I found a silent workstation with a black screen. The first time it happened I reported it to the IT team. I explained that there might be some glitch causing random signals or something similar. They ran diagnostics, checked the hardware and found nothing unusual. They told me not to worry, but I couldn't help but worry. I found myself glancing around more often. I stopped working with headphones on because I was worried about hearing any strange sounds. Whenever I heard a clicking or tapping sound I felt a tingle down my spine. I kept telling myself this can't be true, it's not logical, but I also knew I wasn't imagining it. The anxiety started to affect me. I had trouble sleeping, and in the office my concentration was waning, my productivity plummeted, and I found myself rushing home as soon as I could. Then the day came when I went for a coffee. It was late in the afternoon, probably around 3 p.m. I was feeling stressed, so I wanted a strong cup of coffee to help me get through the last mile. Before leaving my desk I saved my work and locked my computer. I remembered double checking because I was worried about losing my spreadsheet. I also made sure the system was actually locked and it showed the usual lock screen. Satisfied, I went to the break room in the hallway. I saw a colleague asking about new project. We chat for a few minutes, then I go to the coffee machine. I pour a cup, take a sip and realize it is too hot. I stand there blowing on it until it is cool enough to drink without burning my tongue. Then I go back to my cubicle. Everything looks the same at first glance, but when I sit down my monitor is still on and there is a document open that I don't recognize. I lean in closer and try to figure out what the file is. It looks like a text document with some lines that I don't understand. They are not random letters, but they don't form real words. They look jumbled, almost like a corrupted file or something typed in a hurry. My first thought is that maybe I accidentally opened it before locking the screen, but I know I didn't. I close it without saving, feeling a cold sweat on my forehead. I check my recent files and see that the document was created just a few minutes before I left. The timestamp there is mocking me. No one else has my password. My computer was locked. I couldn't explain it that night. I asked the IT guys again to check for any signs of remote access or some kind of virus. They scanned everything, looked through the logs and told me there was no sign of anything unusual. They even joked that maybe the office had a ghost. I tried to laugh, but I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I don't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't deny that something strange was going on at that moment. I started to feel an unsettling presence in that office. Even when all the lights were on, there was something heavy in the air. I jumped when I heard small sounds. I stopped staying late unless I really had to. Over the next few days I noticed little details that made the situation even stranger. Sometimes I would leave my desk for a minute just to grab a file or check something in a drawer across the room, and when I turned again my chair would be in a slightly different position. Not always, but enough to make sure I wasn't imagining it. There were a few times I locked the screen and came back to find a random folder open on the desktop. It didn't seem like anything important, but it was annoying to know that this was happening when no one else was around. I started telling a few close colleagues about these incidents, but at first no one believed me. They teased me about overworking or not getting enough sleep. Eventually, I convinced one of them, Marcus, to stay with me after work to see if we could catch something going on. We stayed a quiet evening waiting in the dark office. We didn't hear anything unusual for about half an hour. Then around 7 p.m. we both heard a light tapping of a keyboard. From 2 rows away, Marcus looked at me with wide eyes. We walked over together and found the computer off as usual. He checked the cable tower, everything was off. He looked scared. He apologized for doubting me, which made me feel a little less crazy. At least someone else heard. But that didn't solve the problem, it just confirmed that I wasn't hallucinating. The next day we spoke again. They checked everything again, and in the end nothing came up. I think they got bored of my requests. They said there was no evidence of interference or intrusion. I was left with unexplained strange noise patterns, moving things and opening strange files. I started to dread going to the office every morning. I walked in with a knot in my stomach, worrying about what I might find that day. One afternoon I had to finish a big report and stayed until everyone else had gone. The cleaning crew usually came in around 6:30 p.m. and I saw them vacuuming in the distance. I was alone in my office suite. The building was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner and the sound of the can't distract myself with music or anything. I try to focus on work, but the stress makes it impossible to concentrate. My back feels stiff and my neck stiffens. Every few minutes I catch myself looking around expecting something to move or some electronic noise to start up. That evening while typing I feel a sudden chill down my back. The office temperature is usually stable, but I feel a distinct chill on my shoulders. My breath catches in my throat. I turn around halfway expecting to see someone standing there. There is no one. My chair feels like it's been jolted, as if it was being pushed lightly. My heart is pounding so hard I can hear it in my ears. I shut down the computer without even finishing the report. I grab my bag and leave. I can't be in that environment anymore. I finished that report from home connected to the remote network, but I have to come back the next day, and the feeling of dread never leaves me. Every time I approach my cubicle I glance to see if the chair is out of place. No, or is my computer on? Sometimes it's fine, other times I find little things, a note I haven't written or a folder on the desktop. The arrangement has changed. It's like someone is using my station without leaving any trace other than these little details. At some point I considered asking my boss to move me to another station, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I had no other logical explanation other than telling him about the strange events. I guess I was worried he might think I was insane, so I kept quiet. The days went by and things didn't improve. I had occasional breaks when nothing weird happened for a while, and I started hoping that it was over. Then something else would happen. Clicking on a system that had powered down or a random window opening on my screen was never a big deal, but the stress kept building. I felt like I was on alert, high activity all the time. My work was affected. My relationships with colleagues became awkward because I was jumpy and easily startled. I could barely sleep at night, tossing and turning with anxiety. I kept replaying the whole thing in my head, trying to come up with a plausible explanation. I finally decided that I couldn't live like this anymore. I went to HR and asked about moving departments. They asked me why, and I just said it was personal reasons why I needed a change of scenery. They said they would see what they could do. While I waited for a decision, I started taking more frequent breaks just to get away. Every time I stepped out, although I felt a crawling sensation on my skin as if leaving the chair unattended would invite another similar event, I would definitely come back and find something moved or a new file opened by the time they approved my department transfer. I felt more relieved than excited. On my last day in that cubicle I remember cleaning up my desk work. I took down the few personal items I had, not much, and shut down my computer for the last time. I felt a little bit of a sense of victory, as if I was escaping from something. But even as I grabbed my bag I heard a slight scratching sound. I turned around and saw my chair tilted back slightly, just like that first afternoon. I didn't wait to see if it moved again. I picked up my things and walked away. My heart was pounding in my chest. Since moving to a different part of the building I've never had any similar experiences. I'm more relaxed now and my productivity has improved. I can't stop thinking about what happened in that old cubicle. Sometimes when I walk past that row of chairs I glance over my shoulder. I half expect to see the chair slide by itself or the screen light up with some random document. I haven't told many people about it. Most people just shrug or laugh, but I know something is messing up my workstation even now when I think about the slow pull the chair or the clicking on the keyboard was silent. I felt a chill down my spine, like someone in that space was working quietly in the dark. Whenever I turned my back, I can't prove it, but I experienced it, and that feeling of being watched never really went away. I still remember the first moment I walked into that old lobby. there was a stench in the air and the reception was under a single light that was flickering a little. I was tired after a long day of meetings, but there was something about that place that just didn't feel right. I decided I didn't care, it was cheap, close to everything I needed, and I just wanted a bed, so I checked in. I had no idea. I spent the night hearing voices in an empty hallway. My name is Matt, I travel a lot for work and I usually pick the ones. The guy in the wrinkled shirt, he told me they only had rooms on the 3rd floor. I shrugged and said it was okay. I signed the register and he gave me an old-fashioned key instead of a key card. The room number was 312. I took the elevator up. It was one of those noisy gated elevators. It rattled all the way and I felt a little jump each time it passed another floor. The lighting inside was dim. I could see my reflection in the polished metal and I noticed how tired I looked. When I got to the 3rd floor, the door opened into a long hallway that stretched out both directions. The carpet was brown and stained near the edges. The cream wallpaper was faded and peeling in some places. Too quiet, too quiet. I could hear my own footsteps echoing as I walked towards my room. I found room 312 on the right side near a small table with a dusty vase. The hallway smelled like old bed sheets. I unlocked the door and walked inside the small room with a narrow bed against a wall and a window on the other side, a thick curtain blocking most of the street light. Outside there was a small chair by the window and a wardrobe with a mirror. The mirror looked opaque as if it hadn't been cleaned well. There was a faint smell of old furniture. I threw my suitcase on the bed and took off my coat. After a quick check I realized there was no bottled water, so I decided to get some from the bathroom faucet. I turned it on and waited a few seconds. The water came out with a slight hiss, then clear, tasted metallic, but I was too tired to care. I brushed my teeth, got ready for bed, and turned off the lights. I lay there listening to a slight hum from the vent. The old heating pipe was rattling occasionally. I closed my eyes. Around midnight I woke up and felt thirsty again. The heating was stuffy, my throat was dry and I wanted more water. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. I was half asleep, but I heard something outside, like a whisper. It sounded like a soft voice, almost like someone talking in another room, but the walls were thin, so I thought it was the neighbors. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The hallway lights were dim. The whispering was clearer, but I couldn't understand the words. They were speaking softly and mumbling like someone was talking to themselves. The sound seemed to be coming from next door, room 314. I looked at the door, but there was no light shining under it. The whole hallway was empty. I stood there for a few seconds feeling a strange chill run down my spine. Then the whispering stopped. I went to the bathroom at the end of the hallway to get some water and go back to my room. It took me a while to fall asleep. My mind kept replaying the soft voice, wondering if anyone was walking around in the next room. I kept expecting to hear it again, but it was the same. The next morning was quiet. I woke up and went downstairs for a quick coffee in the lobby with a receptionist who looked half asleep behind the desk. I asked if anyone was in room 314 because I heard the voice. He stared at me for a few seconds, then shrugged. He said no one was booked before 314. He added that sometimes people complain about hearing voices at night, but they never find anyone. That's all he said. I waited for more explanation, but he just sipped his coffee and looked away. I felt uncomfortable. I shook my head and left for meetings. The day passed. Fast forward and I was back at the hotel around 7 p.m. I bought a burger on the way and ate it in my room. The hallway was quiet again and I tried not to think about the strange noise from the night before. I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels aimlessly. Reception, it was so faint. I finally picked a local news channel and let it play in the background. Around 10 p.m. I turned off the TV and decided to go to sleep. I left the bathroom light on with the door ajar as the room seemed gloomy. I lay on the bed scrolling on my phone for a while before turning off the light. The mattress was a bit lumpy and the pillows were thin. I tossed and turned but eventually fell asleep. After a few hours I opened my eyes and heard that soft sound. My heart was pounding. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The voice was coming from the hallway again. It was a soft whisper, as if someone was having a private conversation right outside my door. I sat up trying to breathe slowly and listen. It never rose above a whisper but felt too close. I swung my legs off the bed and walked to the door. My mouth felt dry and my palms were a bit sweaty. I pressed my ear to the door. The voice continued, but I couldn't make out any words. It sounded like a single person, maybe a man, but couldn't be sure. I took a breath, unlocked the door and opened a crack in the hallway. Wanted to find out what was going on. I hated strange things that I couldn't explain. That night I came back from another long day. I took a hot shower, ate some leftovers I kept in the mini fridge and tried to do some work on my laptop. The Wi-Fi was slow and pages Took forever to load. I finally gave up. The whole building felt heavy, like there was a weight in the air. I could almost feel that as soon as I turned off the lights the whispering would come back. Around midnight I felt my eyelids droop. I turned off the bedside lamp, then turned on the bathroom light. I didn't want total darkness. I closed my eyes, listening to the dull hum of the vents. It was probably an hour later when I heard it again, the soft constant chattering. Felt closer than the night before. I sat up and my heart rate spiked. There was a pressure on my chest like I couldn't breathe deeply. I tried to focus on the noise. My skin got goosebumps on the back of my neck. It felt cold. I stood up and leaned back, walking through the door when whispering right outside, as if someone was standing there with their mouth near the door muttering a string of little words. I suddenly felt angry. I flung the door open. No one was there. I looked left and right into the hallway, motionless. My anger turned to worry. I stood there in my pajamas, scanning the hallway. I even went down to the window at the end just to see if anyone was hiding around the corner. I found nothing. All the doors were closed and the elevator was still on the first floor. According to the dial above, my heart was pounding in my chest and I wanted to scream, but I didn't want to wake the other guests. I rushed back to my room and closed the door. I locked the door and slid the chain through. My mind feeling tense, I laid back on the bed, but my muscles refused to relax. I kept looking at the door, half expecting it to open on its own. I tried to watch something on my phone, but the Wi-Fi was too weak. I finally fell into a restless sleep. The last night I was there I felt exhausted before going upstairs. My day was stressful and I wasn't in the mood for those even stranger events. I got back to the hotel at 9 p.m. with a can of soda I bought from a nearby convenience store. I planned to stay up until I was too exhausted to care about any noise. I sat on the bed and stared at the TV while sipping on the soda. The channels were still blurry. The local news anchor mentioned the heat wave, but I barely listened. I checked my email, but no important information came in. Around 11:30 p.m. I heard faint footsteps in the hallway. They stopped near my door. I felt panic. I turned off the TV and listened. I heard the soft whispering again, but now it was followed by a light tapping like fingertips on wood. My heart was pounding. I walked quietly towards the door, not knowing if I should open the door or stay where I was. The tapping continued for a few seconds, then silence. I stood there, my chest heaving with each rapid breath. I waited. A minute passed, maybe two. Silence. I turned the latch and opened the door. A click. No one was there. The hallway light flickered softly. No sign of anyone. I whispered hello, but no one answered. My voice echoed. I opened the door wider and stepped out. The entire hallway was empty, empty as usual. The air was cold on my skin. I checked near the elevator, then went to my room. I locked the door for the last time that night. I barely slept. I still hear small sounds, but they are getting quieter. They don't seem to come from one place. Sometimes they sound like they are above me, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes near the wall. At 5 a.m., I let me pack my things, shower and go downstairs. I see the receptionist again and he asks if I have rested. I say no and he nods as if he has heard the same complaint 100 times. He says sorry, but he also looks tired, as if he is used to these conversations. I check out and catch a taxi to the airport. I try to shake off the anxiety. My body is tense and my head aches from lack of sleep. I glance at the hotel entrance as we leave, notice the dark windows and the old bricks. I feel relieved to be out of this place. My mind keeps repeating those whispers, but I decide not to think about them anymore. I have a flight to catch and there is so much to do, so much more to do. That place still appears in my mind. Sometimes I think about the long corridors and strange voices in the night. I know others heard it too. I won't go back there again. I've learned my lesson. Cheap rooms and good locations aren't worth my worries. If I hear this whispering through the wall again, I'll change hotels regardless of the price. The experience on them third floor is enough for me. I still remember the first night I heard a knock on the door. I was in my bedroom, knocking in the night. I had not moved into the house for long. It was an old townhouse, spacious but somewhat cold, especially at night. Her roommate had just moved out, leaving her alone with the silent walls. That night, Ha sat on the bed, the blue light from the laptop screen reflecting on her face. The space was so quiet that she could clearly hear the wind blowing through the window. She was typing an email when knock, knock, knock. A soft sound echoed in the room. Ha paused, frowning. She listened. There was nothing else. Maybe it was just the sound of water pipes or the wind blowing. Shaking her head, she closed the laptop and climbed into bed. But as soon as she pulled the blanket up, the sound rang out again. Knock, knock. This time, it came from the direction of the wardrobe. Ha held her breath. A chill ran down her spine. But she quickly brushed away the anxiety. It must be my imagination. She closed her eyes, telling herself she would check again tomorrow. The next morning, Ha stood in front of the old wooden cabinet. She opened the door. Inside was only an old suitcase and a few files. Nothing unusual. She tried knocking lightly on the door. There was no response. Smiling at her unfounded anxiety, she took her clothes and continued her day. But as the night fell, knock, knock, knock. The sound rang out again. This time, it was no longer gentle. It was louder. Closer. Ha sat up straight, her heart pounding. She got out of bed, hesitated for a moment, then approached the cabinet. When she pressed her ear to the wooden door, a loud clack sounded from inside. Ha recoiled, almost screaming. The doorknob didn't move. There was no sign of the closet being opened. Something must have fallen, she reassured herself, but the uneasiness clung to her all night. It was 2 a.m. The room was eerily quiet. Ha lay on the bed, eyes wide open. She couldn't sleep. Then the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was slow, steady. She swallowed, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket. But she knew that if she didn't check, she would never be able to sleep well again. She stood up. Each heavy step brought her to the closet. Pressing her ear to the door. Knock, knock. The knocking sounded very close, as if someone inside was trying to gently tap the door. Ha shivered. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the closet doorknob. Slowly, she turned the handle. The door hissed as it opened. A blast of cold air hit her face. Inside, nothing. Ha frowned. She shined her phone flashlight into the closet, scanning every corner. There was nothing but a suitcase and a few files. She exhaled, preparing to close the closet when the flashlight went out. The night swallowed her in darkness. She pulled her hand back, her heart pounding in her chest. Just as she was about to close the closet door. Knock, knock. This time, the knocking sounded right behind her. Ha froze. Her throat was dry, her heart felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. Her breathing became rapid. She didn't dare turn around. With all her strength, she slammed the closet door shut and rushed to the bed, pulling the blanket over her head. The knocking continued, but now it was coming from right next to her bed. The next morning, Ha left the house. She couldn't stay here anymore. Before leaving, she turned to look at the room one last time. Everything seemed normal. Just an empty room. But when she turned to walk out the door, the closet door opened slightly. No one touched it. A vague shadow appeared in the crack of the door. The screen went black. Darkness behind the door. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes fixed on the closet door. The room was so quiet he could hear his heart pounding in his chest. For the third night in a row, he had been awakened by mysterious knocking from inside the closet. At first, he thought it was just the wind or the normal sounds of an old house. But the knocking had a rhythm, clear, persistent, as if someone was trying to get his attention. He swallowed, his hand trembling as it came to the closet doorknob. A cold breeze seeped through the crack, sending shivers down his spine. Taking a deep breath, he opened the closet. It was dark inside. Only a few clothes hung loosely, an old suitcase in the corner. He shined his phone flashlight inside. Everything seemed normal, but the oppressive, gloomy feeling still clung to him. He carefully checked the walls of the closet, tapping lightly on the wooden surface. A hollow sound echoed somewhere. His forehead wrinkled. Could there be a cavity behind the closet? The next morning, he told this story to a colleague. Nam just laughed and shrugged. It's probably just the wind. Old houses often have strange noises. But he didn't feel any better. The next night, while watching a movie on his laptop, the knocking sounded again. The same rhythm. The same tireless persistence. He closed his laptop and stood up. His heart pounded with each step as he climbed the stairs. The bedroom door opened slightly, the hallway light illuminating a corner of the room. He stopped in front of the closet. This time, instead of knocking, there was a different sound. A whisper, weak but clear. "Get out." He held his breath. The voice came from inside. His hand shook as he turned the doorknob. The musty smell wafted out, stronger than the night before. The flashlight shone on the wall behind the closet, a slightly wobbly panel. He reached out and gently removed the panel. There was no wall behind it. There was a small, pitch-black tunnel. Before he could react, a thin, pale hand reached out from the darkness and gripped his wrist. The night swallowed his scream. The mystery under the floor. I moved into this apartment 3 months ago, a small but comfortable place for a bachelor. Everything was fine, until I started hearing the sound. At first, it was just a slight noise at night, like wood creaking when the temperature changes. But then it became more distinct. One night, while I was reading, I heard a light scratching sound under the floor. It didn't sound like wood expanding. It was steady, lasting a few seconds, then stopping. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a hallucination or that the apartment was old. But then the noise became more frequent. Another night, I heard a small tapping sound, like someone tapping a fingernail on the wood beneath me. A feeling of unease crept into my mind. I started checking the apartment. I tapped on the floor, moved furniture, looked for signs of mice or insects. Nothing. The floor was solid, with no suspicious holes or gaps. One day, I decided to put the phone down to record while I slept. The next morning, I listened again and heard a strange sound. Around 3 in the morning, there was a rattling sound, followed by a light scratching sound and then, a sigh. I almost threw the phone away in fear. I invited a friend to stay overnight to check. But that night, nothing happened. Everything was strangely quiet. My friend laughed, saying that I was probably imagining things. But when he left, the next night, the noise returned. I tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was the plumbing system, maybe the foundation of the building was off. But the noise always appeared in the same place, right under my bedroom. Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to investigate further myself. I removed a floorboard near the corner of the room, carefully shining a flashlight underneath. The darkness was thick, but as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw something. A void. A small space, like a forgotten room right under my feet. And on the dusty ground below, there were traces. Not footprints. But scratches, stretching from corner to corner. I felt my heart sink. I reached down closer, the flashlight beam catching something that reflected faintly. A small metal object, hidden in the dust. I picked it up. An old, rusty ring. At that moment, the scratching sound rang out again. This time, right below me. I froze, holding my breath. And then, a whisper, as light as a breeze. Found it. Up a recording in while I was out of the room, but it seemed like the sound only started when I was there to hear it in person, and it always ended when I made a move. I began second-guessing myself. I checked the basement, the attic and the shed in the yard. I looked for any old Pipes or mechanical systems that could make that kind of noise. The house's plumbing was ancient, but it didn't produce anything like a shovel striking the ground. Everything pointed to an outside source. I considered the possibility of an animal, but I couldn't think of any creature that would make such a consistent metallic sound, and if there was an animal I would have expected to see some signs of digging or damage to the yard. The situation kept me on edge for weeks. I was sleeping worse every night, waking up at the slightest noise. My nerves were shot. I'd lie in bed waiting for it. Sometimes I'd go 3 or 4 nights without hearing anything. Then on the 5th night it will return the same as before, the sound of a shovel hitting dirt, always in the same spot, always around the same time, always stopping the moment I tried to catch it. I started feeling shaky during the day, and I drank too much coffee just to stay alert. My coworkers wondered why I sounded so tense in online meetings, but I didn't want to explain it. The few people I told assumed I was imagining things or maybe experiencing some echo or random house noise, but I knew what I heard. One evening I invited a friend over just to have someone else witness it. We sat in the living room, lights off, quietly talking. We waited until late. He was skeptical. He asked if I was sure it was real. I told him to wait. The night dragged on, but that was one of the nights it decided not to happen. My friend left around 2 a.m. shaking his head. The next night when I was alone, the digging returned right on schedule. I dashed to the back door, but the noise cut off the second I turned the knob. As time went on, the pattern never changed. I never saw anything, never caught anyone, never found any holes. The ground remained undisturbed. Every morning my motion sensor light never detected any intruder. I replaced the batteries and all my flashlights, checked my security system, and even installed a second floodlight in the center of the yard. None of it helped. The sound always began out of nowhere and stopped as soon as I tried to investigate. I still live here. The noise hasn't gone away, but it's less frequent. Sometimes I can go a week without hearing it. Other times I hear it every night in a row. Even now when I think about it, I feel a tightness in my chest. I don't talk about it much, I just deal with it, but there's always a moment late at night when I'm lying in bed and the memory of that metal on dirt sound creeps into my mind. My body tenses up, my breath catches. I wait. Listening, sometimes I hear a faint tap in the distance, but I can never be sure whether it's all in my head or something real out there. I can't escape the thought that something or someone is still digging. I never catch them and they never leave a trace. It's the worst kind of mystery, the kind that hangs in the air and keeps you on edge. So I stay here, turning on every light at night, keeping my flashlight by the bed and waiting for the next time I hear that damn shovel. I haven't found answers, and I might never find any, but I can't stop listening. It feels like this house was waiting to show me something from day one, and I can't shake the feeling that it's not done yet. I heard the first splash around midnight. It wasn't a soft drip or a gentle disturbance. It was loud and clear, like someone threw a heavy object into the water. My heartbeat kicked up and I felt a tightness in my chest. Nobody should have been in the pool at that hour. The club was closed and I was the only person on the premises. I walked over to the pool area, shining my flashlight along the edges, but I saw nothing. The water was flat and still. That was the night everything changed for me. I've worked as a caretaker at this sports club for a long time. It's an old building with a gym, a handful of locker rooms, and a covered pool in the back. People come here during the day to swim laps, play basketball, or lift weights. By 9 o'clock or 10 at night they clear out and I'm left alone to lock up. I don't mind the emptiness. I get some peace and quiet, and usually there's not much to worry about beyond making sure the doors are locked and the equipment is off. Every night I follow the same routine. I start with the locker rooms, switch off the lights, check the showers for leaks, and then pass through the gym to confirm no one is hanging around. Then I move on to the pool area. It's covered by a high ceiling and surrounded cast a dim glow on the water. Usually it feels calm in there. Sometimes it's cold, and the smell of saw a hand so rough and dark. The only light was from a small night light near the door. The doorknob just moved almost by itself. The curtain at the back shook slightly, but there was no shape or form, no shadow, no reflection. I felt sick. I played it over and over again. I saw the same thing. There was movement, but it didn't make sense. I showed a friend the video and he said maybe the handle was loose or the water pressure changed, but that didn't explain why it happened at the same time every night. He told me I should move out, but I didn't have the money to break the lease. I showed Roberto the video. He watched it, shook his head and said he didn't know what to tell me. He reminded me that the last tenant moved out early because of these issues. Management never found any physical behavior. Because he asked me if I ever felt threatened, I said no physically, but it gave me headaches. He suggested that I should ignore it or learn to live with it, which wasn't what I wanted to hear, but I didn't have much choice. The apartment kept doing it. A few nights I started sleeping with the radio to drown out the dripping, and some nights I wore noise-canceling headphones, but the tap still dripped. Sometimes I found the kitchen lights not flashing, sometimes the TV was completely out of time. When I woke up I never found footprints, never found damage to the lock, never saw any signs of a break in. The place was always locked from the inside. I tried everything, checking the tap washers, replacing all the taps with new ones, taping the windows shut to see if it would open. Nothing worked. After a few months I decided I had enough stress. It was exhausting and I couldn't sleep. I wasn't really scared for my life, but I was restless. I told the building management I was leaving. I explained the situation to them and they let me break the lease with a fine. I paid and started looking for a new place. I never found evidence of who or what was making a mess at 3 a.m. Roberto told me he had heard stories about that apartment for a few years. He said no one had been there for long. It could have just been the old wiring of the building, and the plumbing could have had someone with a hidden key. I will never really know. All I can say is it felt too intentional to be a random leak. The knobs were always turned, the curtains were always moving as if someone had walked by, the TV was always broken as if it had been unplugged, or the input had been changed. But no matter what I did I couldn't catch anyone red-handed, and there was no sign of a break-in, which left me with more questions than answers. Even now when I think back, I can't point to anything that was completely impossible. It could have been an extremely silent intruder or some strange malfunction in the plumbing and electrical. Nothing I saw that defied the laws of nature, but it certainly felt off. Okay, it felt like someone or something in that apartment at night, moving around, flipping the taps and messing with the TV. No trace. I'm in a new apartment, not fancy, but at least it's quiet. Sometimes I wake up at night expecting to hear it dripping, but there's just silence. I miss that old place and there's a weird feeling in my stomach. I know it wasn't a dream. I went up to the narrow space, changed the locks, installed cameras. I tried everything but still couldn't find a good reason for what happened. The building management just shrugged. The last tenant seemed to complain about it too. Maybe it's just one of those unexplainable things that happen in old buildings. I don't really know, but the feeling of standing there in my pajamas at 3 a.m. watching the tap drip, even though I turned it off hours ago, is something I'll never forget. And if anyone asks me about weird experiences in apartments old, I'll tell them this story. It's real enough to make you wonder, but there's no evidence of anything supernatural. It's just a thing that happened and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I still remember that night. I realized how strange a place can be when you're alone, even if you've been there 1,000 times. I work in a commercial building that's mostly offices. During the day, people are coming and going, phones are ringing all the time, but at night the place becomes a different environment. I often stay late because my workload is so high, and the usual social lifts are turned off in the evenings, which means I have to use the service lift at the end of the corridor next to the maintenance room. I put my head down and went home. The late shift never bothered me because it was nice to get things done without being disturbed. 9 or 10 p.m., the main lights in the hallway were on, but some smaller offices had their lights off completely. It could be dark, but I was used to it. The service elevator itself was nothing fancy, just an old elevator with metal walls, a small overhead light, and that distinct stench. One night, I finished work around 10:30. I had been rereading a big report for hours and my eyes were tired. I turned off my computer and left the office. I walked to the hallway and noticed that the floor was mostly dark, except for a few emergency lights. I headed towards the service elevator. My legs were stiff from sitting all day, so I walked a little slower. I saw the usual sign on the social elevator saying it was off after 8 p.m. The service elevator was used. Nothing new there. I pressed the service elevator call button and waited. The building air conditioning still running, but the air seemed heavier. I don't know if it's just me getting tired, but sometimes things seem a little off. If I'm alone in a quiet space, my mind will pick up small noises, maybe a faint hum or a click from somewhere. I remember hearing my own voice, the echo of my breathing in the hallway. After a while the door slid open and I stepped in. I pressed the ground floor button where the exit to the parking lot was. The elevator started moving down smoothly. I shifted my bag from one hand to the other and looked at the scene. The wall was scratched under the small lights overhead. The reflection on those metal walls can be a little warped, so I never paid much attention to it. Usually it goes straight down to the ground floor without stopping, especially at that hour, but this time I felt a little jerk. The elevator slowed down, then stopped at a number. The floor looked completely unlit. The door opened right up. I leaned out a little, half expecting the sensor to be triggered by someone. There were no lights in that hallway, no movement. It felt like the power was out on that floor, or maybe no one was using it. I called out. Hello, no answer. The darkness was thick, almost like a curtain. I could see the faint shapes of the walls, but there weren't any windows providing light. It was pitch black and smelled a bit stale, probably from not being used. The doors were still open. The elevator didn't move. I was a little annoyed, so I kept pressing the close button. Nothing happened for a few seconds and it felt like a long time. My heart rate was increasing as I didn't see any reason why the elevator would stop there. Finally the doors started to close. I breathed out and tried to calm down, thinking it was just a glitch. Then as the doors were about to close completely, they jerked again as if something had triggered the sensor, but I not seeing any hands or objects blocking the entrance. I walked over and looked around, but no one was there. I was sure of it. At that moment I had such an uneasy feeling. I pressed the button again. The door closed and the elevator continued to go down. My shoulders tensed. I shook my head and told myself that it was late. I was tired. It was just an accident. Then I looked at the reflective surface in front of me. I saw my face was a little pale when viewed from above the light. My eyes widened. That was when I noticed something else in the reflection, a silhouette behind me. It was a tall man, short hair, standing still in the back corner of the elevator. My heart started pounding, my palms sweated and my mouth went dry. I turned around, immediately expecting to see someone just a step away, but no one was there. I froze for a moment, my ears buzzed. The elevator was empty except for me. The overhead lights flickered a little, but that was it. That's it. No one there. The elevator isn't big, so if there were people I would have seen them right away. From a distance my chest felt tight. Part of me wanted to punch the emergency stop button and run out, but we went down. I found myself staring at the wall behind me, trying to figure out if there was some weird shadow. There was nothing that looked like a man standing there. The elevator dinged on the ground floor and the doors opened. I basically stumbled out, not even looking back to see if the doors had closed properly. My footsteps sounded heavy in the empty lobby. The security guard was at the front desk, but he was reading a magazine. He looked up and asked if everything was okay. I hesitated. I wasn't sure how to explain what I saw. In the end, I just said yeah, I was fine. The elevator was acting weird. He shrugged and went back to his magazine. I walked out into the parking lot. My hands were shaking as I got my car. Taking my keys off, I felt silly, like I was letting my imagination runs wild, but I know what I saw, or at least I know what it looked like in the reflection. There was even thought about the reflection maybe being distorted, maybe just a trick of the light or my own shape at a weird angle, but at the time it didn't feel like it. It seemed too real. The next days I tried to keep to my routine. I stayed up late again to finish tasks. Everything was normal except I found myself checking the time more often. I didn't want to be in the elevator too close to midnight or even 10 p.m. One evening around 9 o'clock I decided to take the stairs. Walking from the 12th floor to the ground floor was quite a struggle, especially after a day of work. But I did it. By the time I got to the car my legs were burning and I was out of breath, but at least I didn't have that tense feeling. I felt safe even if it was unreasonable. Stairs can be scary, but at least I could see everything in front of me. Of course I couldn't avoid the elevator forever. The next night I was too tired to take the stairs again. My knees were a bit sore, so this time I took the service elevator. It went straight down to the ground floor without stopping. I still felt nervous, but nothing unusual happened. The following week I was working late again, but I kept noticing that I was startled when the elevator slowed down. If it stopped on a floor I would get a spike of adrenaline, in case the doors opened onto a dark hallway, but usually they opened onto a floor with lights and occasionally a doorman would. Maybe on those nights quiet but still predictable. I can't forget the memory of that night. The hallway was dark, the reflection, it's still in my mind. Sometimes I find myself glancing at the reflective wall, half expecting to see someone behind me. My posture changes. I started standing closer to the elevator doors so I could see the entire elevator behind me. I realize I'm acting paranoid, but I can't bear to face the metal wall again. I keep thinking, if I see that silhouette again. About 2 weeks later the elevator stops at a floor that looks Almost dark. The overhead lights are dim as if they're just emergency lights. I tense up, the door slides open and I see maybe a light flickering in the hallway that looks deserted. No one is in. I keep pressing the close button. My hands are shaking as the door closes. I brace myself and look at the reflection. It's just me, no one else. I breathe a sigh of relief, but my heart is still pounding. After a month of nights like that, I start planning to leave before it's too late. If I leave before 8 p.m. I can still use the elevator socially. Sometimes I manage, but when I don't, I either force myself down the service elevator or take the stairs if I'm not too tired. I finally told a coworker about it. He wasn't the type to laugh at me. I explained I saw something in the reflection of the elevator. He asked, "Did you see someone coming behind you?" I said no, and he just patted me on the shoulder and said, "Look mate, probably just tired. That building is old, the service elevator is old, weird things happen." He didn't make a big deal about it, which made me feel less crazy. Every time I had to work late, I remember that night. The memory comes back every time I press the elevator button. I think of that dark floor, the doors opening, the stuffy air, and then that sudden moment I see a figure behind me in the reflection. It feels real, but when I turn around there's no one, there's no sound, no sense of someone else present. I'm in alone, but I know I saw someone even for a second. Maybe I fooled my eyes because of the reflection of the metal or the overhead light. Our minds can do strange things, especially when we are alone in stressful situations. I find that realistic for some people. First reason is that some floors in this building are hardly used at night, so they don't turn on the main lights there. If the elevator stops, it's just a dark empty space. Secondly, the reflection in those metal walls can be misleading. The shape of the elevator can distort any movement. And thirdly, sometimes strange things happen that we can't easily explain. It doesn't mean it's supernatural. It could be coincidence, electrical fault, or just me working too hard. I'm not saying I believe I'm haunted, I just know that experience left me shocked. Since then, I've mostly stayed away from that elevator. After work I either leave earlier or try and take the stairs. I still work in the same building. I see the same hallways and the same sign that says social elevators will be turned off after 8 o'clock p.m. But every time I have to take the service elevator late at night, I feel my chest tighten. I feel a little scared. Before you said, asked me if I should stop or continue. I was worried that if I stopped I might regret it, but part of me felt guilty at the thought of ignoring someone who might be in trouble. Eventually my fear overcame all my worries. I gently pressed the accelerator and the car started moving past him. I couldn't take my eyes off him like a statue. Then as soon as the front of my car was parallel to him, he tilted his head slightly as if he was judging me. My chest tightened so much I could hardly breathe. The whole moment felt heavy and dense, like time had slowed down. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. I continued to move forward and my car had completely passed him. I glanced in the rear view mirror. Immediately my heart was pounding. The headlights illuminated the tree trunks, the grass by the road, and a small section of hedge. The man was gone. That was what made me shiver. One moment he was there, the next moment the place looked empty. I craned my neck trying to catch any movement behind me, but I saw nothing but the faint outline of a tree. A shiver ran down my arm. I took a few shaky breaths. My mind tried to make sense of it. Logically, maybe he was out of sight, or maybe I just couldn't see him in the dark, but the suddenness of everything being there for a second then gone was almost impossible. At the same time I knew there was no evidence of anything beyond that strangeness. That didn't mean he was gone, but it definitely was. I kept driving, pressing the accelerator a little harder than usual. My eyes kept glancing towards the rear view mirror even though I wasn't sure what I expected to see. My palms were slippery on the steering wheel. I wiped one hand on my pants, then switched hands and did the same. The same with the other. My breathing was rapid and my pulse was pounding in my ears. I forced myself to slow my breathing by counting in my head. The road continued through more fields and patches of trees. I passed a rusty barn, then a small cluster of sheds near the driveway, all of them dark and quiet. The tension in my chest, it doesn't go away. I turn on the cabin light for a second just to feel less alone. After a few seconds I turn it back off because it makes it hard to see outside. I keep thinking about what I just saw. The man was standing. His clothes looked like they had been dragged across the ground and his eyes looked so intense. I tried to reason maybe he was just a tramp or a lost person, but why was he staring like that? Why was he walking towards me like he wanted to stop me but didn't signal for help? I got no answer. About 10 minutes later I came to a small gas station. It was closed, but the parking lot had a few vending machines. I drove and parked under a dim overhead light and turned off the engine. I sat there for a minute panting, trying to get the feeling over the fluorescent lights. The buzzing and moths fluttering around. I realized I was hungry, but my nerves were so sensitive I didn't have any appetite. I just wanted to calm down. I climbed out of the car and walked to the vending machine and grab a bottle of water. The air outside is damp and cool and I notice my hands are shaking a little as I unscrew the cap. I take a long sip. The water feels good, but my stomach is still rumbling. I look back at the road, half expecting to see a shadowy figure appear. There is nothing there. The only sounds are insects and the buzzing of the vending machine. After a few minutes I get back in the car and start the engine. I take off down the highway again, determined to put more distance between me and that stretch of road. I try to find a radio station with talk shows or some music to keep my mind focused on normal things. The interference is strong, but I eventually find a weak signal playing some old rock songs. The rest of the trip is tense, but I don't see anyone else on the side of the road. Every time I turn a corner I find myself bracing myself for a shadow to appear. It doesn't happen though. Eventually farmland gives way to a few scattered houses and a small intersection. There were flashing traffic lights. As I reached that intersection, I felt relieved, my body relaxed a little and I realized how stiff my shoulders were. I got home around midnight. The first thing I did was lock my car and check my windows. I usually don't worry too much, but that night, I felt the need to be sure. When I got in, I kicked off my shoes, put my luggage down and went straight to the bathroom to wash my face. The cold water on my skin helped me feel calmer. I saw my reflection in the mirror and saw that I looked very confused. My eyes were wide open, my face was a little pale. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept imagining the man walking out towards my car, his eyes staring at me. I woke up with a start after a few. Now my heart is pounding. The next day I got up early, made some coffee and tried to forget about it. I thought it was just one of those weird experiences on the road. Maybe I should call the local police station to report a suspicious person, but I didn't have a license plate or anything to give them, and he didn't actually commit a crime. He was just there and then he wasn't there. For the next few weeks I avoided that route. At night if I had to go to work I chose another route even if it was longer, but eventually circumstances forced me to drive that long again. This time I left earlier in the afternoon, so I still had some daylight. As I went through the whole driveway I was on the verge. My stomach was tight and my hands couldn't relax on the wheel. As I got closer to where the sun was setting behind the horizon, but there was still enough light to see the tree, I slowed down and glanced to the right of the road. There was no one there. The tree looked normal. The fence had the same farmland. The other side of this place looks empty, but my heart is pounding. I feel a layer of sweat on my forehead. Despite the comfortable temperature, my legs are tense and my foot hovers over the accelerator pedal, ready to accelerate if I catch a glimpse of anything unusual. Nothing happens. I pass by that spot, keeping pace and finally letting out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding my breath. I've passed that spot a few more times since then. I never saw that man again, but each time my pulse quickens and I feel a cold feeling in my gut. It doesn't make sense, but my mind pulls me back to that night. I still picture him standing there covered in grime. Eyes locked on my headlights. I replay the moment he stepped forward and I wonder what his intentions were. If I stopped, would he ask for help or would things have gone differently? I have no answers. All I have is the memory of that strange encounter in the middle of nowhere. At least to me, I felt the tension in my bones. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Nothing supernatural. It was just a man, but there was something about him that was off. That was what made it so scary. It was a normal road, a normal night, but I still shiver when I think about it. My hands get wet remembering the way he looked at me. Sometimes people ask me why I get so restless on country roads. I don't usually share this story because it sounds like nothing happened, but it was exactly that. It was just a person standing next to a tree at night, but it made me feel like I was in serious danger. I try not to think about it anymore. I'm still wary whenever I pass that area. If I see someone standing on the side of the road I slow down enough to get a better look, but I rarely stop. Maybe it's selfish, but I don't want to have to find out the truth the hard way. If my intuition is right, that night basically no dramatic ending at all. I got home safe and I never found out who he was or what he wanted. All I know is that his eyes seemed to cut straight through the darkness and locked onto me. The fear I felt was so pure and immediate. That feeling hasn't faded even now. If I close my eyes and picture that spot on the freeway, I can almost feel my heart rate increase again. Maybe it was just a random guy, or maybe it was something else. There was something else going on I'll never really know, but that's why it felt so real, so vivid. There were no flashing lights or other signs, just a man on the side of the road. That was all it took to shock me more than I'd like to admit. I never thought a few words on a wall could shock me, but I was wrong. The first day I walked into that basement studio I felt sure I had found a hidden gem there, very quiet with thick walls and flowers blocking out the noise of the city. I wanted a space to practice and record, and it seemed perfect. Then I found those messages and everything changed. I will walk you through step by step what happened the way I remember. I am not adding any fancy decorations or insights. I will just tell you what I did, what I saw, and how I felt at the time. I discovered this place through an online ad. The ad showed a few photos of a cramped but comfortable room with exposed pipes on the ceiling and foam panels on some of the walls. The ad mentioned good acoustics, cheap rent, and no neighbors complaining about noise. I used to have a small home studio before, but my neighbors were always annoyed if I recorded late. Strong hallway. There are a few doors on the left, all closed, and pipes running along the ceiling. We stopped at the last door. Inside it wasn't pretty, but there was enough room for my stuff. The foam panels on the walls were torn up a little and a few cables were in the corner. There was a single overhead light with a fluorescent tube flickering. The manager said I could replace it if I wanted to. I would tap my foot on the concrete floor. Solid sound didn't travel far. This was exactly what I needed. I signed the lease a few days later. The price was low and the manager seemed happy to finally have someone reuse the studio. He told me it had been empty for months, which made it didn't feel like a glamorous place, and it probably took a specific type of tenant to want a studio in the basement. I liked the isolation. On my first official day as a tenant, I took the monitor and a few instruments downstairs. I also took cleaning supplies. The walls looked dirty and the floors needed to be cleaned. Cleaning. I wanted to get everything in order away, so I put my stuff down and knelt down to dust the corners of the room. I remember hearing my breathing, a slight echo. It was a small space, but you could feel the echo. I liked how real it felt. Studio environment. I was cleaning the wall near the door when I saw those words written in thin black marker on one side, about knee high. Did you hear his voice? At first I thought it was just some leftover graffiti. I squinted at it and noticed the letters were shaky, like someone had written them in a hurry. It looked more like a question than a random phrase. I ignored it. I saw weirder things in the rehearsal space. People like to write nonsense on the walls. It didn't scare me, but it just felt weird. But I focused on cleaning later. A few hours later I had dusted off most of the dust. I set my monitors up on a sturdy table I had brought and plugged them in. I put my mic stand in a corner and put some cables in. I checked everything out. The place has good acoustics as advertised. The overhead light still flickers occasionally. I tried tapping on the furniture, but that didn't help. I figured maybe I'd replace it later or bring a lamp. I spent the next few days bringing in more instruments. By the end of the week I had everything: a keyboard, a couple of guitars, a small drum machine, and some chairs. The environment was very quiet except the slight noise from the ventilation ducts was from the caretaker, not the manager, but a young man in overalls who passed by a few times. He was usually cleaning the hallways or checking the ducts. He barely said anything, just nodded at me. Then the night I stayed late for the test recording, the building was mostly empty after 7 p.m. I got there around 6 a.m., set up the mic and started playing some loops. I didn't notice anything strange for about an hour. I recorded a simple guitar part and tried out some lines. I stopped to listen back through my headphones, and that's when I realized how quiet the hallway was, which isn't unusual, but it was heavy. At around 8:30 p.m. I started packing. I walked towards the wall with the lights going out one by one, the overhead light flickering and noisy. I flipped the switch and the room darkened, leaving a soft glow from the hallway light. As I went to unplug my device I noticed something on the floor near the desk. I knelt down with a red marker. The words "He saw you." They were almost the size of the black letters on the wall. 0. My first reaction was confusion, then it suddenly spiked panic. My chest tightened and my heart was pounding. I looked around, but I was alone. I picked up a nearby rag and some spray cleaner, trying to wipe it off. The red marker smudged a little but didn't come off. My hands shaking, and I felt this a feeling of being watched, like I wasn't alone in that basement. I rubbed harder, but the stain didn't completely go away. I picked up my phone and used the flashlight to scan the rest of the floor. I didn't see any other messages. I checked the corners under the desk behind my equipment. Nothing else was there. I didn't hear any footsteps or voices. The caretaker hadn't been in all that time. As far as I knew. I felt my pulse quicken. I was breathing hard and my palms were sweaty. I decided to get out of there. I turned off all the other lights, locked the door and rushed up stairs. I didn't see anyone in the hallway or lobby. The building seemed deserted that night. I didn't sleep well. I tried to tell myself it was just some graffiti left, but I couldn't shake the thought that it looked new, as if someone had done it recently. The next day, in the morning, I came back earlier than usual. I saw the caretaker around. The caretaker looked confused when I mentioned the writing. He just shrugged and said he didn't see or hear anything. I tried scrubbing the black messages on the wall, faded a bit, but the words were still visible. The red marker on the floor looked stubborn, like it had stained the concrete. I knelt down and used a harder sponge, but it only blurred the edges of the letters. The shapes were still there. He saw my friend. I felt restless the whole time. Every sound in the hallway startled me. My mind started to wander. Who was he? Why would someone write like that? For the next few days I was busy with my music. I tried to ignore the marks, but they were always in the corner of my eye. Sometimes I moved my device so I didn't have to look at the writing on the floor. Other times I taped a piece of cardboard over the words on the wall, but I knew they were still there. The caretaker's reassurance didn't do much for me. I kept thinking someone had a key or someone that was sneaking in. Whenever I took an afternoon off, I decided to talk to the building manager again. I went upstairs, found him in the small office next to the lobby. I told him about the article. He seemed surprised but calm. He said the last tenant was a musician, but that guy left months ago. He never complained or mentioned anything strange. The manager also insisted no one else had rented the space, since he offered to lend me some paint to cover up the graffiti if I was offended. That's when I realized I was alone. No big explanation, just me and those words. I painted over the writing on the wall with a small can of white paint, mostly covering the black letters, but I could still see a faint outline if I looked closely. The FL floor was a bigger problem. I tried painting it too, but the red marker had soaked through. First coat of paint, I did a second coat, although there is still a slight shadow of the letters. If the light hits at the right angle, my nerves are on edge every time I walk into that place at night. The basement is colder. I started hearing these soft noises, the creaking in the pipes. The caretaker told me it was normal, just water still running. Whenever I heard them, my stomach would turn and I would stop whatever I was doing to listen. I would wait for any sign of someone lurking around. Sometimes I would open the door to the hallway just to check no one was there. Every time the messages messed with my head. They were simple, but they fueled my imagination. Have you heard his voice? He seen you? It was like a warning or a question, but I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't sure if I should be worried about a stalker or if it was just random SC I tried to focus on the music, but the stress made it hard to concentrate. My recording sounded lifeless. My mind wasn't in the right place. After a month I started dreading my visits. That basement smell made me feel claustrophobic. I noticed every flicker of the overhead lights. I found myself glancing over my shoulder. Even when the caretaker was nearby, I felt exposed, like the walls had eyes. I hated this. Feel like I would rent this space to create, not stress about strangers or mysterious notes. One evening I decided I had had enough. I packed my main gear, guitar, microphone, a small mixer. I left some cheaper stuff I planned to get back. My hands were shaking because I carried the boxes up the stairs. I kept listening for footsteps behind me. My scalp tingled every time I heard the echo of my own footsteps. When I reached the lobby, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The next morning I canceled the lease. I told the building manager I had found another location that fit my schedule. Better. He didn't push it. He just said he understood and he would keep my deposit if I left before the end of the contract. I accepted that. I didn't want to argue. I wanted to get out of there. I went back one last time to get the rest of my stuff. The caretaker saw me in the hallway and asked if there was a problem. I said I just needed another space with more air. He nodded like he had heard that reason 100 times. I wondered if he suspected the real reason, but I didn't want to explain the messages again. I wanted to be done. As I walked into the office, I saw the faint marks on the wall where I had painted them were almost unreadable now. The floor was covered with an old rug I had laid down. I folded the rug up and tucked it underneath. I caught a glimpse of the faint red letters one more time. It made my heart pound again. Hurriedly, as I carried the last box out, I took one last look at the empty room. The overhead light flickered. A low hum filled the silence. The smell of damp concrete lingered. My face was hot and I could feel my pulse in my neck. I locked the door behind me. Walked away feeling relieved. No more scribbled words, no more strange chills, no more musty basement again. I told myself it was all just random vandalism by a previous tenant. Maybe some stressed out musician wrote nonsense on the wall. That explanation made sense, the manager said. No one else was there, so maybe it was old, maybe it was ignored, until I realized the fear came from not knowing it was it. But still, every time I remember that red phrase, I feel a knot in my stomach. He saw you. I can't explain why it bothered me so much, but it saw me. Never went back to that building. I don't have any ghost stories or evidence of intruders, maybe just the graffiti left behind, but I still remember the feeling of panic. My palms were sweaty, the way my eyes glanced, every shadow felt real to me, and that was enough to make me leave. That's my story. No dramatic ending, no revelation, just a studio in the basement, weird words on the wall, and I walked away before anything worse happened. Some people might laugh at that, but I don't care. I still don't want to see those words again. I still remember that night with absolute clarity. We were on our way home from a barbecue. It was almost midnight and there were no street lights around, the only light coming from my headlights cutting through the darkness. My heart was still pounding from the noise and joy at the party, but there was also something else that I couldn't explain. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The asphalt seemed endless and I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. My name is Mark. I was driving my old car, a late 90s model. It had done some mileage, but it had never given me serious problems. I had recently changed the battery and had the alternator checked a few months before. I trusted that car. It got me through sea and a few road trips without much trouble that night, although it would show a side that I hadn't seen. My friends Alex and John were with me, Alex in the front passenger seat, John in the back. The three of us had spent the day at a friend's house having a barbecue. We had eaten too much and probably had more to drink than we should have, but I felt stable enough to drive. I didn't tipsy, I was just tired. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard and it read 11:48 p.m. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I could smell the lingering smoke from the grill on my clothes. The windows were rolled up and the cabin felt a little stuffy. I turned on the aircon, but it only blew out moderately cool air. After a while Alex started talking. He told a joke about one of our acquaintances, a guy we all knew from town. This acquaintance was known to be very religious. He always carried a small religious book in his pocket and he didn't drink or party. Alex said something like, I bet he would quote verses to us if he was there tonight. I laughed a little. John chuckled from the back seat. We didn't mean it in a bad way, just teasing. But then Alex pushed it further. He started mocking the friend's beliefs, imitating his seriousness. The tone, we all laughed, but deep down inside I felt a little uncomfortable, even though right then, maybe in the middle of Alex's joke, there was something had happened to the car. Lights, overhead lights flickering even though it was not on, was set to door. We were driving home from a gathering, and John made a joke about a friend believing in premonitions. The group laughed, but as soon as the word premonitions was uttered, the dashboard lights flickered. The radio screen went black for a second, the air conditioner fan dimmed, and the headlights dimmed so much that the road ahead almost disappeared. A shiver ran down my spine. Alex gripped the armrest, and John was silent. I tried to act calm, but I couldn't deny the unease. There was no curb or gas station in sight, so I decided to keep driving. No one said anything. The engine hummed steadily, but I was aware of every little sound, the squeal of the accelerator, the rattle of the air conditioner vents. My heart was beating faster than usual, my mind stuck in the moment. After a few minutes of silence, Alex said, "This is weird. It happened right when we were joking about it." I shrugged, trying to say it was a coincidence, but I didn't believe it myself. John muttered, "That's weird." He seemed shaken, despite trying to sound tough. Alex joked again, "Is God punishing us?" He laughed, but his tone was strained. At that moment, the car shook violently. The headlights were so dim I thought we'd lost them. The engine wheezed as if it were about to die. The dashboard went dark, save for the faint glow of the hazard lights. I gripped the wheel, my eyes glued to the darkness ahead. Sweat poured down my forehead. Alex cursed, and John shouted, "What the hell?" Then everything went back to normal. The engine started up again, the headlights came on, the dashboard flickered and stabilized. I gasped, my hands shaking as I reached for the water bottle. "That's enough," I said. "No more jokes about that." Alex and John fell silent, as if in tacit agreement. Maybe the car had just had an electrical fault, but the coincidence was too perfect. I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, but part of me couldn't deny the unsettling feeling. We drove on in silence. The lights stopped flashing, the engine ran smoothly, everything seemed back to normal. When I saw the sign for the main highway, I breathed a sigh of relief. There were finally streetlights, a few other cars around. A sense of security returned. We started talking about random things, sports, recent games, avoiding any topics related to religion or belief. I dropped John off first, near his quiet neighborhood, hoping nothing strange would happen. Old houses. I waited until he got in the front door, then I drove Alex to his house. On the way to Alex's house we barely spoke. I think we were both replaying the drive in our minds. I remember looking at him and seeing the tension in his jaw. He gave me money for gas and I waved, saying, "Don't worry." I was still confused. After dropping him off I went home, parked the car and sat there for a minute before getting in. I was sweating and my heart was still pounding. I locked the door feeling uncertain. The next morning I woke up early. I felt like I needed to figure out what was wrong. I took the car to a local mechanic, a guy called Rick I had known for years. I explained the symptoms. The dashboard lights were flashing, the headlights were dim, the engine was almost dead. I told him the battery and alternator were pretty new. He opened the hood and checked the cables, tested the electrical system, ran diagnostics. After an hour he said he didn't found any problems, everything seemed fine, no error codes, no loose wires, no weird voltage drops. He shrugged and said maybe a one-time glitch. That answer didn't satisfy me, but I had to accept it. I drove the car that day around town trying to get it to flash again. I turned on all the lights, the AC started, the music loud, nothing happened, it ran perfectly. I called Alex and John afterwards. They both asked if I found any problems. I told them no, we joked about it but we avoided it. The religious angle, I just felt weird mentioning it, as if we didn't want to tempt fate again. To this day the car hasn't had the exact same problem. It's been years and I still can't explain it. I've changed a few parts since then, spark plugs, a belt, some filters, but never fixed any wiring issues, as no one found any. When I mentioned it to people, they said it sounded like an electrical short or maybe a problem with the ignition system, but no one could explain why it fit our jokes the way it sometimes happened late at night. I replayed it in my head. We were on that dark road, far away from people, talking about something we shouldn't have. Every time we pushed that line the lights went out, then when we stopped the car was running perfectly. Maybe it was a weird coincidence or a random electrical problem due to vibration whenever we talked too loud, but it was consistent enough to freak us out. Why was it realistic? Because every part of it could be a mechanical problem. Sometimes the wiring could be broken, a connection could be loose, maybe a small short had shoved when we talked or moved in the seat. No ghosts, no shadows, no final explosion, no one died, but the coincidence made me feel it felt like something wanted us to stop talking. Even after all these years, I still don't have a better explanation for it. It was the wiring, maybe something else. All I know is that it happened and I don't want to repeat that experiment. I've learned to be careful with what I say, especially on deserted streets late at night. I came home that night feeling like a dead battery. I had worked a long shift, and all I wanted was a hot shower and a few hours of sleep. I pushed open the door to my small apartment and threw the key on the kitchen counter. It was cramped with only one bedroom and a small living room attached to the kitchen plus a bathroom in the corner. I liked it because it was cheap and close to my work and I usually didn't have to share it with anyone. I found the quiet relaxing that night, even though something was wrong. As soon as I walked in I locked the front door out of habit. The click of the latch gave me a little comfort and I told myself that tiredness is playing tricks on me. The living room is the size of a walk-in closet. I have a small couch against one wall, a TV opposite, and barely enough room for a coffee table. The kitchen is a couple of cabinets, a stove and a fridge all lined up together. The wall. This place smells old, like I need to open a window, but I'm too tired to care. My bedroom is to the right, separated by a thin door that I usually leave open. The bathroom is a small space on the other side with a narrow shower stall, a toilet and a small sink. Soon after I throw my coat on the couch, take off my shoes and trudge straight into the bathroom. I'm too tired to do anything else. I turn on the shower, adjust the temperature until it's as hot as it can get and step into the water. The steam blurs my vision and for a second I close my eyes. The dull ache in my shoulder starts to ease. I let the water hit my back and try to think of something that doesn't Bedroom floor. My eyes widened and I stared at the bathroom tiles. My first thought was that maybe the upstairs neighbor was walking around, but the footsteps sounded so close it felt like they were just a few feet away. Right in my bedroom, I reached into the faucet and turned off the water, leaving me completely silent. Small drops of water dripping from my hair onto the bathroom floor. I listened, trying not to make a sound. Then I heard another soft noise like a creak on an old floorboard. I swallowed. My throat suddenly went dry and my heart was pounding. Speeding up, I grabbed a towel and wrapped it around my waist and walked towards the bathroom door. I hesitated, my hands were shaking, and I realized I was standing there in a small bathroom with only a locked wooden door between me and whoever might be out there. I flipped the bathroom door lock. My pulse was pounding in my ears. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded weak. I cleared my throat and tried again, a little louder. Someone was silent. I pressed my ear to the door, but all that I can hear my own breathing. My hair is dripping. Water falls to the floor. After maybe half a minute, I decide to open the door. I have no weapon and I'm not even wearing pants, but I think if there is someone inside it's better to face them right away because waiting is worse for my nerves. I turn the lock, turn the knob and open the door a crack. I glance into my bedroom. My lights are off and the room is dark except for the faint glow from the hallway light. I poke my head out and scan the room. My bed is unmade. The pillows are piled up. My wardrobe door is partially open, but that's normal because it never latches. Yes, everything looks the same as when I left that morning. I walk into the bedroom. My footsteps hit the carpet because my feet are still wet. I check the wardrobe first, yank the door open. There's nothing inside but wrinkled shirts and my old shoes. Then I tiptoe to the corner between the bed and the wall. Although there's barely enough room for a person to hide, I bent down to look under the bed, only to find a few cardboard boxes and some dust. I tried to ignore the goosebumps on my arms. I kept reminding myself that I lived alone, no one else had a key. I walked into the living room, my wet feet leaving marks on the hardwood floor. My couch was empty. The small kitchen was exactly as I had left it, although the fridge was humming as usual. I checked. The apartment door was still locked from the inside. I felt my shoulders relax a little. I told myself that I must have imagined it, or maybe it was the pipes that were wide open. Old buildings always do that, especially when the weather changes. The thing is, I knew the pipes were clanging or banging, not the slow, deliberate footsteps. But I tried to brush myself off. I dried myself off in the bedroom, put on sweatpants and a t-shirt and went back to the kitchen to heat up a can of soup. I still felt tense, but I tried to focus on the task service. I turn on the stove, pour soup into a small pot and stare at it while it heats. The silence in the apartment heavier than usual. I turn on the TV in the living room just loud enough to cover the silence. Some random late night show is on the screen. I glance, but can't focus. My mind keeps going back to those footsteps. After my soup is done, I slurp it up. Standing at the counter, I don't want to sit. I can't sit. I keep looking over my shoulder at the bedroom. It's pitch black. The only light is the dim light from the living room lamp that shines halfway up the door. I think about turning on the bedroom light, but I feel a little silly. If I'm dealing with an overactive imagination, then going around turning on every light still doesn't make any sense. I can't shake the anxiety. After washing the dishes, I check the apartment one more time. I look in the bathroom that juts out behind the shower curtain. I check under the sink. Even though no one can get in there, I look under the sofa. I glance at the small coat closet near the front door. No anything. I feel a little better. I lock the door from the inside, then go to bed. It's only about 10:30 p.m. but I'm so tired. My body is exhausted from work. I turn off the living room light so the apartment is dark except for the faint light of the street light through the bedroom window. I lie on the pull-out bed, cover up to chest and close eyes for a while. I just listen to the faint sound of cars outside in the distance, the deep voices of neighbors, and the occasional honk from the street. Slowly, I start to relax. Then just as I am half awake and half asleep, I hear those footsteps again. It sounds right outside my bedroom door. My eyes widen and my breathing speeds up. There are 2 steps, then stop, then 2 more steps, like someone is walking. My body goes cold. I slowly sit up in bed, trying not to make any sudden noises. The bedroom door is open so I can see the shape of the hallway. Nothing is moving there. My heart is pounding really loud. I think maybe it is an echo. The footsteps this time are louder. I fumble for my phone on the nightstand and turn on the screen to light up the area. I can't see anything in the door frame. My hands are shaking so much I almost drop my phone. I am debating whether to call the police, but what am I going to say? I hear footsteps, but no one is here. They will come. And looking around, probably finding nothing, I slide out of bed, trying to be as quiet as possible. My bare feet hit the cold floor. I grip the phone and headed towards the bedroom door. Opening, my knees felt weak. I looked into the hallway. It was dark and I could only see the shapes of the furniture in the living room. I walked slowly and carefully into the hallway. The air was cold. I listened, holding my breath. I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heart. I turned on the lights. The hallway, the living room looked empty. The front door was still closed. I tiptoed through the living room, checking every corner. I stood there for a minute, phone in hand. I scanned the space. Nothing. I realized I was sweating even though the apartment was cool. My face was red and my mouth was dry. I swallowed and tried to calm down. I walked to the door and opened it quickly, expecting to see someone in the hallway. Outside, no one was there. The hallway was empty. The lights were dim. I stuck my head out and looked both ways. Silent. I closed the door, lock up, and do my stupid habit of checking behind the couch, inside the bathroom closet, under the bed. Everything is empty. When I finally crawl back into bed, it's almost midnight. I turn off the bedroom light, stare at the ceiling and wait. My whole body tenses like a coiled spring every time a pipe squeaks or the fridge clicks. I'm startled. I find myself hyperventilating, so I force myself to breathe slowly. My head is spinning with thoughts. Have I locked the windows? Has no one snuck in yet? Earlier in the day, I lose my mind from exhaustion. I lay there for hours, unable to sleep. Every time I start to fall asleep, I startle awake thinking I hear a stream or a soft noise. Doesn't help when the building makes random noises. Sometimes the building is old and the walls are thin. I'm on the second floor, so sometimes I can hear the guy upstairs, but the footsteps I hear seem to be in my house, not upstairs. I can't explain it. Around 3 a.m. I wake up, put on slippers, and walking around the apartment, I turn on the living room light. I turn on the TV and the first random show that comes on is some commercial for kitchen appliances. I stare without really understanding. I just need the occasional distraction. I turn the TV off and don't listen to anything, then I turn it back on. After a while, my eyes start to burn with fatigue. By 4, I'm so tired my head keeps falling forward. I decide to try sleeping on the couch. I grab a thin blanket from the bed and lie down on the couch, leaving the living room light on. I face the bedroom door, keeping it in my line of sight. The hallway is still lit, so if something moves in there I hope I'll see it. I close my eyes and try to relax. My back starts to ache from the couch, but I'm too tired to care. I may have dozed off for 20 minutes or so, but around 4:30 I hear light footsteps in the bedroom again. My eyes snap open. The TV is still on with the volume low. The hallway light cast a weak beam of light on the bedroom door. I didn't see any movement, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. My eyes started to tear up from the tension. My heart was pounding in my chest. I lay still on the couch, one hand clutching the blanket, the other holding the phone. I lay there motionless for at least 10 minutes, no more noise. Finally I mustered up the courage to get up and check the bedroom again. The room was exactly as before, empty. The sheets and pillows were all messed up on the bed and I could smell my own sweat on the pillow. I looked in every corner, shook the curtains, opened the closet and almost stuck my head in nothing. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, the TV on and the lights on. No more footsteps, or if I did I probably muted them. The next morning I was devastated. My eyes were bloodshot and my neck was stiff. I walked around checking everything, but everything was normal. No signs of forced entry, no random objects moving, no footprints on the floor. Just my own footprints from earlier. It was one of those experiences that made my mind spin. Maybe it was the pipes, or maybe the upstairs neighbor was walking in some sort of way that fooled my ears. Maybe the floor was expanding with the temperature change. No proof anything else, but I couldn't shake the feeling that those footsteps were in my bedroom and not upstairs. I had no reason to believe in anything supernatural, but I couldn't explain it either. That's why it felt so real. I was there, I heard it, and I couldn't find anything else. Explanation: I had no visitors that night and also no roommates. I heard those footsteps more than once. I eventually chalked it up to building noise or some kind of coincidence, but I will never forget how my heart pounded when I heard someone walk into my bedroom. I have had sleepless nights before, but that night was a class apart. It felt like I was living in someone else's space, or they were living in mine, and I couldn't see them. Even now I still think about it sometimes, especially when I get home late and the apartment is dark and quiet. I guess you never really know all the sounds an old building can make, or maybe you do and you try to ignore them, but that night there was no way to ignore anything. It was just a few feet away and kept me awake until the sun came up. I drove into that area expecting a quiet drive and a few photos. Creepy. I Never thought I will end up alone in the dark listening to the whistle as it winds around my bones. I am an amateur photographer who pursues ghost rumors and strange happenings in my spare time. I often see old drafty houses or strange lights. This time it was different. The land was empty, the sky was vast, and the air was holding its breath. The first night when I heard the whistle outside my tent, I realized I was in a place that did not follow the usual rules. I arrived in the afternoon on a dusty road that seemed to stretch on forever. Pale green fields and dotted with small rocks stretched out on both sides. There were no neighbors, no farms, no animals, just the wind blowing through the tall grass. The only signs of life I noticed were a few brown bushes and maybe a hawk or two circling overhead. The sun was high in the sky and the heat radiated from the earth in waves. I felt myself sweating. The smell gathered around my neck. Even with the window down, I drove looking for a good spot to set up camp. My goal was simple. I wanted to photograph any signs of the spirit that was rumored to whistle at night. The locals in the nearest town had warned me that they said whistle lure people away from safety or sometimes flag them down, but they had no details. They just shrugged and shook their heads. When I asked for more information, they told me no one had ever been out there for so long. I thought it was like an old story retold for tourist purposes, so I tried to act normal. When inside I was excited. I found a small clearing near a group of weathered boulders. Those rocks looked as if they had been there forever, formed by the strong winds that never seemed to stop. I parked near them and pitched my tent in the shade. The wind picked up a bit, making the tall grass roll like a slow wave on the car radio. Can't find any channels. I try my phone, but no signal. I decide to accept the isolation. The first day passes calmly. I walk around with my camera taking pictures of the landscape. Nothing unusual happened. The sun is bright and the temperature makes the horizon sparkle. I look for traces of footprints or old campsites, but all I see are scattered rocks, some broken branches, and endless grass. Late afternoon, the wind starts to cool. I take out a small camping stove and heat some tin soup. I watch the sun set behind the hills. The color in the sky looks clear and sharp with streaks of orange and red. I turn on my flashlight and sit in the tent ready to wait. My camera has a new battery charged and I have a voice recorder. In case facing the night starts to get quiet. I hear the crickets chirping echoing across the vast expanse. I move around the rocks and scan the horizon. I see nothing. The grass, rocks, and a faint line of hills in the distance. The whistle fades, then starts again. It must be getting closer. My skin tingles. I try to hold my breath. Calm down. I raise my camera and take a few pictures, hoping the flash might catch something. I wait. I feel the hair on my arms stand up. Then the whistle stops. Silence, except for my own breathing. After a while I return to my tent feeling restless. I decide to jot down a few notes in my voice recorder. As I speak I notice my voice shaking. My neck stiffens and my stomach churns with tension. I finally fall asleep. The next morning I wake up with a warm ray of sunshine on my face. It feels so strange, as if I imagined the whole thing. The day is normal again. The sky is blue and the grass sways gently. I have a quick breakfast and play back my voice recorder. I hear my own voice describing the whistle, but in reality I couldn't hear it. It was missing from the recording, which struck me as strange. There is often background noise, even if faint. I tried to shake off my frustration and decided to explore further on foot. I walked for about an hour towards the low hill, carrying my camera and some water. The landscape didn't change much, all grass and rocks. The wind touched everything. I was always alert, scanning the horizon for any people or animals. At one point I spotted a couple of large birds in the distance, but that was all over by midday. I rested and had a drink near a cluster of rocks. I noticed some shallow scratches on the rocks like old carvings, but they looked natural. The sun was very strong, so I returned to camp late in the afternoon. The clouds were drifting in the wind, which accelerated, making the tent flaps creak. I could feel the tension in the air, as if a storm was about to hit. I decided to set up my tripod and see if I could get any shots of the landscape under the approaching clouds. Close as I focus my camera, my hands are shaking a little. I actually find myself thinking about the siren the night before and feeling uneasy about the hours ahead. As darkness falls I sit on a camping stool outside my tent. I turn off the flashlight and let my eyes adjust to the moonlit plain. My heart beats faster as time passes. I am waiting for that siren. I feel exposed in the open space, but I want a clear view of whatever may be coming. For a while nothing happens. The wind rustles through the grass and I hear some creaks far away from the rocks. Then I notice a faint sound drifting on the wind. It is the same siren, steady, a little deeper this time. My jaw is clenched. I try to stay calm. I pick up my camera and point it towards the sound, but I can't see. 9:30 at night, not a soul passing by. The siren gets louder and it changes pitch the banyan tree along my dark village. I stand up and walk out of the tent, my body as if there was a fire burning in my ears. I tried to speak loudly. He had never seen time pass so slowly. The siren stopped then. Feeling restless, started again, unable to hide the tension. I took a few steps forward, scanning the horizon. Cigarettes when I noticed a shape that was barely visible to a darker outline in the night. It was the lighter had just been lit, revealing his yards away. It looked and the half-drunk bottle of wine beside him. He took the air was still warm. I adjusted the camera with a long sigh and took a few pictures. My breath caught in my throat. When I realized the figure was wearing a hood, I couldn't see as if wanting to tear the dark sky shape motionless in the moonlight. There's going to be a storm. The siren drifted across the distance gently but persistently. I wanted to run, but I also wanted to record it, so I tried to get close from keeping my camera ready. I walked slowly, my shoes pay off his gambling-addicted father's debt and money because I didn't want to startle anything out there. And more important move, but the siren never did stop. Land's hand in until I'm maybe 50 yards away, and then the village blows the grass bends the other way, and I lose sight of that figure for a second. When I look back, many times he had visited Land's house and expressed his desire to get married so hard. But I think I might always look down on him, and many times even hinted in front of Huang. Is nothing I want to run back to the tent. When a daughter gets married, but I don't want to turn my back on that place. The whistle starts to fade to reduce her suffering. Behind me, I turn around. Don't be blind. Flashlights all around without a stable field, but no wonder I feel dizzy. I force myself to go back to the campsite. Then you'll sit around cursing and insulting each other all day. Dry and my hands are shaking. My scalp is tight and my shoulders ache from the tension. The voice of Mrs. Hugh, his lover's mother, a few words still haunted his mind. My husband and I only have one daughter. Grass. I looked through the camera's memory card. 20 years of raising most of the photos she is so beautiful fields, but so I don't want my child to suffer in the future. At the edge of the frame, if you have a stable job, a decent family, no face, we won't forbid anything because we know you also truly love Lon. It also proved that I wasn't imagining things. Think about your spent the rest of the day walking around the campsite. You're 30 years old. Whether to leave or stay another night. At first, telling myself I had come here to photograph, but after thinking about it, and now I still had a chance. Was right, but my gut was still twisting. At a disadvantage, something wasn't right about this place. His mother died early. That his father was forced myself to drinking and gambling. I walked in a wider circle, just a temporary moment or any trace of a trail. But I found some flattened patches of grass, but they looked like places already wind had flattened them even more depressed. I saw worn tracks. No matter how much money he made, they didn't look like he had to worry about paying more like his gambling scratches. I took pictures of everything I found, although not much as it was dark. I boiled some water for coffee enough to try to concentrate, thinking about his fate. If the siren sounded, I considered turning on all the lights, not knowing when he would have a chance to change his life from the car or even honking the horn. At his lover, I was curious to hear the siren again, looking embarrassed and awkward. To something that scared me. It felt like I was being pulled in two directions. The night was falling and the moon was peeking out from behind. By the end of this year, I will have a stable job and clouds lit up in the faint light. The wind was gentler tonight, I will have enough money to take care of sound more clearly. My own footsteps on the ground around her hand to interrupt. Started her voice became louder. First I stepped out of the tent, camera in hand, not sure if I would. I always see you promise. Regret. I heard my heart pounding. The siren got closer. The tone changed. Almost when you were able to walk towards it, feeling anxiety. People with money don't need to promise. When I saw the hooded figure again, this time it appeared near the rocks on the opposite side of my camp. As she spoke, the shape blended she stood up and went into the whistle sounded from its direction. From now on, figure itself, I hope you will let my daughter go. Or head it stood still. From I raised my camera. Find someone who is suitable for your situation. Shown on the rocks. My eyes struggled to adjust in the moldy chopsticks can't fit a red tray. For a moment, I could not see the figure anymore. Then I saw it again. Although on the far side of the rocks, I was sure it had changed position without making a sound. My gradually she became more accepting. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The whistle. Those who married rich men all seemed happy. Eating well and dressing well. I walked closer step by step. My body felt tense. My legs stiffened. When I got to where there was no one on the street, back to scan worrying the field about making was when I realized the whistle was now behind me. I turned before her eyes. She hesitated even more about her love life. The moonlight, if you was just a hooded figure, happiness will never last long. I took another picture, but the light flash is useless at that distance. Her mother lowered the camera and stared at it. The siren began to hesitate, the air, then half wanting to break up, becomes wanting to give for something else, but it stays. If he still couldn't build a career, a few seconds later a light breeze blows back, shaking the grass. The bright silhouette still stands. The son of the vice chairman. I don't know if I should approach a hiding place. My head is buzzing with adrenaline. My ears are pounding. I'm scared. Tang had also had his eye on her for a long time. I forced myself to back away. He was ugly. She might not love him now. Don't turn away from it until I get close to the light together. Inside the tent, I zip it up and sit in the dark for a long time, shivering. I can't see the siren doesn't return for the rest of the night, but I feel its presence like an invisible thread. Please take time to take care of your work. The silhouette on the horizon in the morning I decided I needed to leave. I had her lover's way of speaking, and I didn't want to tempt that force anymore. I packed my things as fast as I could. The day was bright and hot, and I felt sweat dripping down my back. What's with your attitude? Half my shoulder expecting to see a hooded figure standing in broad daylight, no matter what the circumstances were, you still wanted to be my wife. Shut. My hands were still shaking as I started the car. I drove off and explained the rearview mirror constantly. Her voice filled with resentment and bitterness. Empty and silent in the sun, I felt a little more realistic as I approached the main road. We've been in love for remembering those nights. I've waited for you to have a siren felt alive, as if it was looking for me. I couldn't tell if it wanted to harm me or lure me into something beyond my understanding. And lowered his head slightly. Had it more than once. I have the photos to prove it, although they are blurry and barely show the silhouette. The house is dilapidated and lacking. Vulnerable, he stayed with me until I got in the car all day long. He waved goodbye, and when he's not gambling, back to his car, he drinks, parked on another street. Trouble. I kept expecting to see the same figure. I think about you, but you also have to think about my life. Around, I got in the car, locked the doors, and drove away. 9:30 at night, from mirror to mirror, scanning every car behind me. Nothing stood out. When I got home, I was still along the dark village road. Better than the night before. The following week, as if there was a fire burning in his diner as possible. Sometimes he had never seen time pass so slowly right across the street. Sometimes feeling restless, had to walk his face unable to hide attention. To avoid walking those 2 blocks. I asked my cigarette if he could get a spot behind a cigarette and put it to his lips. But he said no. I almost considered the lighter had just been lit, revealing his flushed face and the half-closed bottle of wine beside him. One particular night, maybe a month later, I went through my normal routine. With a long closed sigh. At 11 p.m., wiped the table off, turned off the lights, a few zigzag lightning bolts flashed as if wanting to tear the dark sky apart. Is across the street. There's going to be a storm not too far away, which still makes me feel better. I feel the same lump in my stomach. I scan the sidewalk tonight, and everything would change completely. No one is out there, at least not that I can see. He would have money to pay off his gambling addicted father's debt, the doors and money to repair the dilapidated house. Speeds up, even though there was no reason for it. That he would have money to ask for anxiety. I start the engine and take the most beautiful girl. No one is there. I remind myself for a long time. Nothing serious happened except for a tense encounter, but it's enough to make me look back. Many times he had visited Land's house and expressed his desire if he's planning on stealing my car, always looks down on checking random cars for an easy target. Could he be the one who wants to rob me? When a daughter gets married, but that she must choose someone the way good economic conditions still sits in my gut feeling feels like a don't be blind. Warning, marry someone without a stable job. The thought of someone watching my routine at night scares me. I told a few friends about it. Then you'll sit around the same thing and insulting each other all day. Of your surroundings. It will be too late to regret it. Spray. I always keep one. The voice of Mrs. Hugh, now just his lover's mother, also makes sure to change my closing routine when I can. My husband and I only have one daughter. The diner's schedule is after more than 20 years of raising her. The closing she is so beautiful, make a parking so I don't want my child to suffer in the future. At least not if you have a stable job. I don't realize part of me expects him to show up again one night standing next to the same spot waiting to see if I show up. The thought makes my stomach drop. I try not to think too much about it because I still have to live my life. You're 30 years old. What do you have? I can't deny that my sense of security has been affected that night, but I used to walk to my car without much thought. Now I hold the keys in my hand, born at a disadvantage compared to unlocking the door. His mother died early. His father was bored and threw himself into drinking and gambling on a dark street, that it was just a temporary moment to relieve his sadness. Enough to make me wonder how safe I really am when I'm out there alone, especially late at night. I don't think I'll ever forget that face, the way he stared at my car. No matter how much money he made, he had to worry about paying off his gambling debts and close as I could to the diner. I didn't want to be in that situation again. Who were his standing there with had enough to eat and not sure if the next move about his would be a surprise. He was always just a weird conversation. Not either way, I didn't want to risk to change his life. Moved into this old apartment, thinking it would be a fresh start. Looking embarrassed and awkward. Wrong, right? That he said to Mrs. Hugh, I noticed something that made me uncomfortable. I promise you, by the end of this year, I will have a stable job and move out to live on my own. The lights were off and the only thing I will have enough money to take care of lawn. About an hour later, I woke up. Quickly waving her hand to interrupt, not loud but steady enough to keep me from falling back asleep. I checked the bathroom sink first, but it was dry. Then I walked into the kitchen. I heard a dripping sound somewhere above the ceiling, which looked old with a few people with money don't cracks need to near the corners. Others still believe there might be a leaking pipe inside the wall. People with nothing only know how to promise water stains or damp patches. As she spoke, was still dry. She stood up and went into the room like a mist of dripping. From now on, I hope you will let my daughter go. It seemed like it was higher on, Find someone who is suitable for your situation. Up to the ceiling I didn't have the energy to investigate further that night, so I went back to the couch and tried to ignore it. The next day I bought a step ladder and a flashlight. Although I decided to check the loft space. She listened to her mother whispering every day, and gradually she became more accepting. Top floor, so no other units. There was an old crawl space with a panel in the hallway. I pushed it out, eating well and dressing well. Inside it dusty with cobwebs. Those who married poor men pieces of old insulation, selling things on the street, no puddles, worrying about making ends meet. Spots I was up there maybe before her eyes. Checked every she hesitated even more about her so I went back and sealed the panel and thought maybe it was just random will never last long. But then the dripping continued. Remember for the next few nights, always around her mother advised, sometimes lasting a minute or two. Lon began to hesitate. Other times it lasted for half an hour. It wasn't loud enough to call maintenance at that hour. If he still couldn't build a career, she would marry Chang. Helped a bit, but I could still feel a guy with a bright future. Drops, the son of the vice chairman of the commune. That maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, or maybe it was the old building settling down, which made me anxious about a week later. Something else happened. I woke up in the middle of the night. Ugly, she might not love him now, to that dripping but after their married life together, who knows, things might change. Enough. I got up, went to the kitchen and turned on Kwong off to the village road. Light switch, she hesitantly but nothing happened. The light didn't turn on. Please take time to take care of your work. For a while, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness so much. The dripping continued. I reached her lover's way of around on the counter and finally found my phone to use as a flashlight. Quickly grabbed her hand and said angrily, "Phone light towards the sink. What's with your attitude?" It was dripping. Actually, it was dripping like it was only half open. I knew for sure I had no matter what the circumstances were because I had a habit to be my wife. I was a bit obsessive about that thing. She removed Kwong's hand and explained angrily. I stood there listening for the noise and stopped. No sound of water falling into the sink, but you have to be a little more realistic. Next to the fridge was swaying a little. We've been in love for 3 years. I've waited for you to have a stable job. I walked over and checked to see if it was still locked from the inside. Answer me. I put my hand on it to see if there was a draft. No, lowered his head slightly. Still moving a little. But with tears in his eyes, I looked around the kitchen. Everything else seemed stable. The house is dilapidated and lacking. Open, no drawers were pulled out. No signs of forced entry. I went out into the hallway too. He drinks, checked the circuit breaker, thinking it might be a power outage. That's when I heard the fridge buzzing again. So the power wasn't off. I turned the stove switch off, then back on a few times. The light never came on. I walked back to the living room. The TV was off, and its little standby light was dark as if it had been unplugged. I walked over to check the power cord. It was plugged, as if there was a fire burning in his heart. But nothing happened. Then I noticed the cable time pass so slowly. Was off too. It normally shows the time. Feeling restless, his face unable to hide the tension. It was just the living room and pull out the outlet cigarette pack. Took out a cigarette. The hallway lights were on, although the bathroom lights were working. The lighter had just been lit, think there was a local electrical face, and the half-drunk bottle of wine in those areas off and on again. He took continuous puffs, the kitchen lights smoke with a long sigh. I heard the TV powering on, and the cable box lights lightning bolts flashed as if wanting to tear the dark sky apart. Back to the living room. The TV was out of sync. It was showing static as if it had lost its channel settings. He muttered softly. I had never seen it like that before. After tonight, I had to everything would change completely. I didn't sleep much that night. He would have money to pay off his gambling-addicted father's debt. I found money to repair the dilapidated house. Glancing at the window blinds and taps every few minutes, he would have money to ask for Lan's hand in marriage. It seemed fine. The most beautiful girl in the village whom he had loved for a long time, almost like someone had gone through the kitchen, damaged the taps and left without a trace. Many times he had visited Lan's house and expressed his desire to get married. They had a key, but her parents always looked down on him. Many times even hinted in front of Kwong. It creaked safe when a daughter gets married. She must choose someone with good economic conditions to reduce her suffering in the future. He came around noon. Don't be blind. Marry someone without a stable job. Light switch checked circuit breaker. He said everything was okay. He turned on the water tap. Then you'll sit around cursing and insulting each other all day. I told him about the crawl space, but he said there was nothing there except old insulation. The voice of Mrs. Hugh, for the building's ventilation system, still haunted his mind. Said the building was about 4 years old, so some cracks eat the odd drip. After more than 20 years of raising her, she tried to reassure me, saying so I don't know my child wasn't suffering, but he left me with that explanation. If you have a stable job, to the building manager, a guy called. We won't forbid anything because Roberto, I asked him if there had been any reports of break-ins or weird plumbing issues. Well, he looked at me about your family situation. He meant you hear noises at night. You're 30 years old. Told me people had complained about the same things dripping at odd hours, lights flickering, TVs, but after thinking about it, what she said
No
was
reason
right.
that made me even more
Born
worried.
at a
I asked him if
disadvantage
the tenant
compared
ever
to
found
others.
out Roberto
His mother
shrugged.
died early.
Said the tenant
His father
blamed
was
the
bored
age of
and
the
threw
building,
himself
or
into
maybe
drinking
someone
and
sneaky.
gambling,
Nothing was
thinking
proven
that
that
it was
night.
just
I
a temporary
double-checked
moment
everything
to
before
relieve
going
his
to bed.
sadness.
I did,
But unexpectedly,
make sure the windows were locked, the doors
making
were
his
latched,
already
the taps
poor
were closed.
family
I even
more
unplugged the
deprived.
TV just to see if
No
that
matter
made any
how much
difference.
money
I
he
fell
made,
asleep
he
around
had to
midnight,
worry about
paying
paying
off
off
his
his
gambling
gambling
debts and
debts and
anything
debts
else
to his
happened
father.
definitely at 3 a.m. While his friends, who were
startled
his age,
awake,
had
it
enough
was
to
a drip,
eat and
drip,
save.
drip. I
Thinking
quietly
about
got
his
up
fate,
without turning
he was
on the
always
light. I
wandering
walked
and
slowly
struggling,
towards the
not
kitchen,
knowing
feeling
when he
my
would have a
pulse in
chance
my
to
ears. My
change his
palms
life.
felt sweaty. The hallway was
Kwong
dark,
glanced
but
at
I
his
could see
lover,
a faint
saw
light
her
from
head
outside
down,
street
looking
light in the
embarrassed
living
and
room.
awkward. Just in
He
case
said to
I got
Mrs.
to the
Hugh,
kitchen
with a
entrance,
firm
I got
attitude,
Buoni Pores plus
I
Boo
promise
and
you,
Passer
by the
pour
end
un
of this
million
year,
de vous
I will
aider
have a
à
stable
le
job
faire
and move
Mine
out to
starts
live on
racing.
my
Did I
own.
forget to turn off the tap?
I will have
No,
enough
I
money
remembered
to
turning
take
it
care
off.
of
I
lawn.
turned it on.
Please
He off
believe in
once.
me.
A quickly
times
waving
then
her hand
closed
to
it.
interrupt. The dripping
Her voice
stopped shortly
became louder.
after I heard a quick shuffle
Stop.
behind me near the
Stop.
living room. My room SP.
I
turned
always
around
see you
expecting
promise.
to see
We'll
someone.
do
The
this.
living room
We'll
was
do
empty.
that.
The curtains were still there.
But then
the
I
door
don't
was
know
locked.
when you
I
will be
forced
able to do
myself
it.
to go through. People with money don't need to
check
promise.
The door was
Others
still latched
believe.
From the inside. I felt my
People
chest,
with
my
nothing
hands
only
were shaking
know how
a
to
little.
promise
I could feel
all
my
day
heart
long.
beating. Alors
As she spoke, she stood up and went into the room. From now on, I hope you will let my daughter go. From now on, that it wasn't
find
a random
someone who
plumbing
is suitable
problem
for your
someone had to
situation.
move it, but there was no one in the
Stop
apartment
daydreaming.
except me. I
Moldy
looked around the
chopsticks
apartment
can't
to
fit a
see
red
if anything
tray.
was wrong. All the windows
Please come
were
back.
closed. The locks were intact.
Although Long
no
loved
new
Kwong,
footprints on the
she
dusty
listened to her
spots
mother
near.
whispering every day.
Windows
and
the hallway
gradually she
outside my
became more
apartment was
accepting.
quiet. The main door
Looking at
was
her
also
close
locked.
friends,
I also
those
checked
who
the
married
chain
rich
from
men
inside.
all
Everything
seemed
was
happy,
safe. I went
eating
back to
well
the
and
kitchen,
dressing
opened
well.
closed
Those
each
who
cupboard.
married poor men
looked
looked
under the
miserable,
sink. Nothing. I
selling
went to bed
things on the
feeling
street,
uncomfortable,
worrying
about making ends meet.
Left the small light on in
Seeing
the
the
bedroom
truth
just
to
before
calm
her
my
eyes.
nerves. The next
She
week
hesitated
was the
even
same
more
again
about her
around
love life.
1500 hours. Shantae.
If you are poor,
I heard a
happiness will
dripping
never
sound,
last
sometimes
long.
soft, sometimes loud.
Remember
enough
that.
to make me stand up immediately.
Her mother
Every
advised.
time the handle Jenai
Long began
rang,
to hesitate,
half wanting to break up,
The
half
curtain
wanting to
swayed
give
as if
Kwong
someone
more
had
time.
just
passed by one night.
If
The
he
living
still
room
couldn't
TV
build a
lost
career,
all channels.
she would
even
marry
though I
Tang.
had set them at the beginning of
A
the
guy
day.
with a
Another
bright
night,
future,
the kitchen lights,
the son of the
wouldn't turn
vice
on
chairman
until I
of the
turned on the
commune,
circuit breaker.
the person
I
her
asked
parents
Roberto
had chosen.
again if anyone else had a key.
And
more importantly, Tang
Tang
said
had
the
also
building
had
had
his
a
eye
master
on
key
her
for
for
emergencies, but it was kept in a locked
Although he
cabinet.
was
The
ugly,
maintenance
she
staff
might
only
not
used
love
him
him
with
now,
a work order.
but after
they
their married
recorded
life
every
together,
time they took
who
it. There was
knows,
no record
things
of
might
it being
change.
used on my apartment at night.
That
He said I
night,
could change the
seeing
lock.
Kwong
off to the village road.
If I wanted,
she
I went
hesitantly
out and
said,
bought a new lock and installed
Please take time to take care of your work. 00 Dumat. We shouldn't see each other so much. Drip, drip. I ran into the kitchen,
Seeing
turned
that
on
her
the
lover's
light,
way of
saw the
speaking
tap
seemed
dripping. The
cold
rest of
and
the
distant.
apartment. Still no sign of a
Kwong
break.
quickly
And I felt
grabbed her
trapped in.
hand and said angrily,
Some strange cycle.
Hey,
I tried
what's
staying
with your
up from
attitude?
midnight to 3 o'clock.
What did you
to see
promise
what was
me
going
before?
on, but that night nothing
Didn't
happened.
you say that
Only
no
when
matter
I fell
what the
asleep was I woke
circumstances
up
were,
by the noise.
you still
I
wanted
started
to be
having
my
trouble
wife?
sleeping. I looked tired
Confused,
all the time. My
she
coworkers
removed
asked
Kwong's
me
hand
if I
and
was
explained
stressed out.
angrily.
Her voice
Didn't want
filled
to
with
sound
resentment,
crazy,
and
so
so I
bitterness.
just said I was having trouble
That's
sleeping
true,
in the new place.
but you have to be a
inside
little
I
more
was very
realistic.
nervous. My nerves would pour.
We've been in love
for
3 years.
Connected to
I've
a
waited
webcam
for you to have a stable job,
webcam on
but
the
when?
sink to record overnight.
When?
I wanted proof.
Answer me.
That the tap turned on
Kwong
by
stammered
itself,
and
or that
lowered his
someone
head
was
slightly.
sneaking in. I was, with tears in his
Saw a
eyes,
hand
so
so
rough
rough
and
and
dark. The only light
house
was
is
from a small
dilapidated
night light
and
near
lacking.
the door. The
Your
doorknob
father
just
gambles
moved almost
all
by
day
itself.
long,
And when he's not
gambling,
shook slightly,
he drinks,
but there was no
causes
shape
trouble,
or form,
and curses.
no shadow, no reflection.
I think about
I felt
you,
sick,
but you also
have to think about my life.
Played
it over and over again.
Up until
I saw
now,
the same
ghost
thing.
stories
There
had
was
not
movement,
bothered
but
Kwong
it didn't
much,
make sense
because he had
I
never
showed
seen
a friend
them
the
before
video
anyway.
and he said maybe the handle
Death
was
is
loose
the
or
end.
the water pressure changed.
He
but
thought
that
to
didn't
himself,
explain why it happened at the
if
same
digging
time
up a
every
dead
night.
body
He
was
told
scary,
me being discovered by
should
others
move
was
out,
even
but I I didn't have the money to break the lease. Although he gave himself two choices, a video. One was to have everything to change his life, and said he didn't. The other was to lose everything. He reminded me that the last tenant moved out early because of his family. Management never found jail for at least a few years. That was what because he asked me if I ever felt very careful. I said no physically. He couldn't let anyone see or suggested that I should ignore it or learn to live with it. Why are you sitting here? Wasn't what I wanted to hear, but I didn't have much choice. The apartment kept doing it a few nights. His eyes widened. Sleeping with the radio to drown out the dripping holding a bright flashlight. I wore noise-canceling headphones. Kwong was both surprised and annoyed by his untimely kitchen lights not flashing sometimes. Although both of their jobs involved the dead, when I woke up I never found procession team like Kwong, Trong was a professional grave builder, never saw any signs of a break in the place. They had known each other since childhood. I tried everything, checking the tap washers, replacing all the taps with new ones, taping the windows, the bottle of wine would open. Nothing worked. Drinking wine. After a few months I decided I had enough stress, it was exhausting. Trong burst out laughing. Sleep. I wasn't really scared for my life, but I was restless. Holding the bottle of wine and looking at it. I was leaving, I explained the situation to drinking them, wine and they let me break the lease with a fine. Alone in the middle of a stormy night for a new place I never found evidence. Do you think I believe what was making a mess at 3 a.m.? Kwong grabbed the bottle. His attitude Roberto fierce. Told me he had heard stories about that apartment. What I do has nothing to do with you. He said no one had been there for long. Why are you so hot? The old wiring of the building, and I was just asking. The plumbing could have had someone with a hidden key. There must be some business. I will never really know. All I can say is as soon as he discovered Kwong sitting here, a random leak, Trong quickly sensed something. Always turned. The curtains were always moving as if someone's attitude and the sack hidden behind was always broken under the flashlight helped him realize many unusual things. Or the input had been changed, but no matter what I did I could not catch anyone red-handed and there was no sign of a break-in. Is there anything I can do? Which left me with more questions than answers. There is not much work these days. I can't point to anything that was completely impossible. My wife is about to give birth, so I need money. An extremely silent intruder or some strange malfunction in the plumbing intending to invite him to join. I saw that defied the laws of nature, but it certainly felt off okay. It felt like someone or something in that apartment at night moving around, which he never wanted. The taps and messing with the TV. Kwong's attitude softened. No trace I'm in a new apartment. He had to be gentle to find a way to get rid of him. Sometimes I wake up at night expecting to drag of his cigarette, but there's just silence. I miss that old place. Yeah, there's a weird feeling in my stomach. I know it wasn't a dream I went. If there is anything, up to the narrow space, changed the locks, installed cameras. I tried everything, eyes lit but still couldn't find a good reason for what happened. The building management just shrugged. The last tenant. Do you need me to help you with anything? Maybe it's just one of those unexplainable things. Hearing Trong's things that happen in old buildings, suddenly I don't really know, confused. But the feeling of standing there in my pajamas at 3 a.m. watching the tap drip, even though I turned it off hours ago, is something I'll never forget. And if anyone asks me about weird experiences today, I encountered many annoying I'll tell them this story. I was sad, so I came here to sit and drink enough wine. To make you wonder, but there's no evidence of anything supernatural. It's just a thing that happened, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I still remember that night I realized how strange a place can be when you're alone, even if you've been there. Go home and take care of times I work in a commercial building that's mostly offices. I'm about to do big business. People are coming in district town. Phones are a lot of work all the time, but at night the place becomes a different environment. I often stay late because my workload is so high. I'm free these days. The usual social lifts are turned off in the evenings, still glanced, which means I have to use the service lift at the end of the corridor next to the maintenance room. I have to go home. Kwong replied. I put my head down and went home. Yeah, I'm going home too. Never bothered me because it was nice to get things done without being disturbed. Looking at Trong's clumsy figure holding a flashlight, the main lights in the hallway were on, but some smaller offices had their lights off even though he felt much lighter inside. But I was used to it. The service elevator itself and took a long fancy. Just an old elevator. The alcohol with metal walls seeped into every muscle, overhead making his body feel excited and that distinct stench erasing the vague fear I finished work that had just begun to flicker. I had been rereading a little lightheaded for hours and my eyes were tired. The large sack was placed under the my computer and left inside were a shovel, a crowbar, I walked to the hallway and noticed that the floor was mostly dark, except for a few knife was tucked into his waist. I headed towards the service. That was enough for him to do his job. His years as a construction worker had given him a lot of experience, so I walked a little slower. He carefully picked up the sack and stood up. Social elevator, shadow was vague in the vast darkness that was covering. The service elevator was leading to the field there I pressed the villagers called button and waited the building air conditioning where Mr. High had been buried a few days ago. Still running but the air seemed heavier. During the day it was already just getting tired. At night it was even more gloomy, seem a little desolate. If I'm alone to the point of being creepy, my mind will pick up small noises, maybe a faint hum or finish dawn. Somewhere I remember hearing my own voice. He told himself and walked faster with the strong wind of my breathing in the hallway. After a while the door slid with the rustling sound and I pressed the ground sides of the road where the exit to the parking lot was. The elevator started moving down still flash shifted my bag from one hand revealing to the shadows of a few graves faintly appearing. The wall was scratched under the small lights overhead. Suddenly the reflection on those metal walls can be a little warped, so I never paid much attention to it. Usually it goes straight down to the ground floor without stopping, especially in his head, as if someone was following. I felt a little jerk. The elevator slowed down, then stopped, turned his head around. The floor behind him was only a long dirt road. The door opened right up. I leaned out a little, spreading their leaves in the wind like to be triggered by someone. There were no lights in that frogs croaking from the fields. It felt like the power was out on that floor, or maybe no one was using quiet night. I called out.
Who dares to come out here at this hour? The darkness was thick. He muttered almost and ran into the cemetery. I could see the faint shapes of the walls, hazy mist covered hundreds of large and small graves. It was pitch black and smelled a bit stale, intertwined in long rows, being used, stretching the doors were still open. The elevator didn't move. The deeper we went, a little, the colder and gloomier the air so I kept pressing the close button. It was nothing difficult to find Mr. High's grave like among dozens of other graves. My heart rate was increasing as I didn't see any reason why the elevator would stop there. Team to finally the door started to close. It looked like a high mound to calm down, covered with a few wilted wreaths. It was just a glitch. Had just begun then as the doors were about to close completely, he sat down, they jerked staring again at Mr. High's portrait printed on the tombstone, but I not seen any hands or objects blocking the entrance. A 70-year-old man with a wide forehead, but no one was there. I was sure of it. Layer of that moment under his chin. Such an uneasy feeling. The most impressive feature on his face was probably his fierce eyes, and the elevator continued to go down into the hearts of the people opposite. I shook my head under the rumbling light that it was late. Huang felt that Mr. High was just an accident. If he were still alive, I looked at the reflective surface stand up awkwardly. I saw my face into those pierced eyes viewed from above. The graves here were all 1 meter 8 deep. That was when I noticed something else in the reflection. A silhouette behind me. With his strength and experience, short hair, it would take at least a few hours to dig of the elevator. My heart had to be finished before 4 o'clock in the morning. My mouth went dry. Holding the shovel in his hand, he reflexively looked around the cemetery. See someone just a step away, the wind was still blowing, making it sound like someone was crying and lamenting. The elevator was empty except for me. He dug the shovel deep into the grave, but that before he could scoop it up, no one there. He suddenly stopped. The elevator, his intuition telling him that someone was around right away. The second time he had such an uneasy feeling, part of me wanted to punch the emergency stop button and run out, but we went down, holding his breath. I found myself staring at the wall behind me trying to figure out if there was some gray shadow undulating in different heights. Like a man standing there. His eyes narrowed. The elevator slowly on the ground floor, and the doors opened. Discovered a black shadow out, not even on the back of the grave. The doors had closed properly. My footsteps sounded heavy. Then suddenly, from that direction, a scream rang out. But he was reading a magazine. Huang suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Asked if everything was okay. I hesitated. I wasn't sure how to explain what I saw, causing the cat to growl. I was fine. The elevator was acting weird. It's really a grave and went back to his magazine. I walked out into the parking lot. My hands were shaking as I got my car. When they saw a black cat taking my keys off, I felt silly, like I was letting my imagination runs wild. But I know what I saw, or at least I know what it looked like in the reflection. In the desert, thought about the reflection maybe being there was only one person shadow, light, or my own shape. His hands were stiff, but at the time it didn't feel like it. Quickly scooping up shovelfuls of dirt and throwing them to the side. I stayed up late again. The alcohol as well as the gold under this grave. I found myself checking the time more often. It was unclear how many hours had passed. Close to midnight. His body was soaked with water because the rain was pouring around 9 o'clock. I decided to take the stairs. He stopped to wipe the sweat that was running down his ground floor. He was quite a struggle from exhaustion, especially after a day of work. Were already covered in mud. But I did it. By the time I got to the car, my legs were burning and I was out of breath, shaking his head vigorously a few times, making a cracking sound. Even if it was unreasonable. The scenery around him was still dark and hazy. At least I could see everything in front of me. Gusts of wind blowing like the sound of a ghost lamenting and calling out to people from deep underground. The next night, I was too tired to take the stairs again. Up at the sky. My knees were already in a rectangular hole. I took the service elevator. The hazy mist covered hundreds of large and small graves. I still felt nervous, but lying intertwined in long rows. Happened the following week. I was working late again, but I kept noticing that I was startled when the elevator slowed down. The air became. If it stopped on a floor, it was not difficult to find Mr. High's grave among dozens of other graves surrounding. Usually they opened onto a floor. He himself had come here with the funeral team. Occasionally a doorman would maybe on those nights. It looked like a high mound of predictable. I can't forget the memory of that night. The hallway was dark, just begun to sprout. Still in my mind sometimes. He sat down, I find myself staring at Mr. High's portrait printed on the tombstone that still behind me. My posture changes. A 70-year-old man with a wide forehead, to the elevator door so I could see the entire elevator behind me. I realized I'm acting paranoid. The most impressive feature on his face was probably his fierce eyes. If I see the silhouette again, about 2 weeks later the elevator stops at a floor that under the rumbling lightning. Almost dark, the overhead lights are staring at him as if just emergency lights. I tense up, the door slides open, and I see maybe a light flickering in the hallway. It looks deserted, no one is in. I keep pressing the close button. My hands are shaking as the door closes. I brace myself. And 1 meter 3 wide. And look at the reflection. It's just me, no one else. I breathe a sigh of relief. It would take at least a few hours still to pounding after a month of nights. So it had to be finished before 4 o'clock in the morning. If I leave before 8 p.m. Holding the shovel in his hand, I can still use the elevator socially sometimes. I manage, but the wind wind was still blowing.
When I don't either
sound like someone
down the
service
elevator or take the stairs,
gritting
if I'm
his
not
teeth,
too tired,
he dug
I
the shovel deep into the grave.
about it. He wasn't
Before
the
he
type
could
to
scoop
laugh
it
at
up,
me. I
he
explained
suddenly
I saw
stopped.
something in the
His
reflection
intuition
of the
telling
elevator
him
that
that
someone
someone
was
was
around.
around.
Someone coming behind you.
The second time he had such an uneasy feeling.
He just patted me on the shoulder and said, "Look, mate, probably
He
just
stood
tired
still,
that building
holding his
old
breath,
the service
looking
elevator
around.
is old weird things happen."
All
He didn't
around
make
were
a
only
big deal
cold
about it,
graves,
which made me feel
undulating
less
in
crazy
different
every
heights.
time I had to work late.
His
I
eyes
remember that
narrowed.
night.
He slowly and
The
carefully
memory comes
observed,
back
and
every
immediately
time I
discovered
press
the
the
black
elevator
shadow
button.
looming.
I think of
moving
that
on
dark
the back
floor
of the
the doors
grave
next to
opening the
him,
stuffy
looking
air,
towards
and then
him.
that sudden moment,
I see
then
a figure
suddenly,
behind me
from
in
that
the
direction,
reflection.
a
It feels
scream
real,
rang
but
out.
when I turn around,
Meal.
there's no one, there's no
Huang
sound, no sense
suddenly
of someone
breathed a
else.
sigh of relief.
A stray
Present I'm
cat.
in alone,
But I know I
he
saw
picked
someone
up a brick
even
and
for
threw
a
it
second.
hard.
Maybe
causing
I
the
fooled
cat
my
to
eyes
growl and
because of the
angrily leap.
reflection of the metal or the
It's
overhead
really a
light.
grave cat.
Our minds can do strange
He
things,
muttered and
especially
cursed.
when we are alone in stressful
People were
situations.
afraid when they saw
I
a
find
black
that
cat
realistic
twice
for
as
some
big
people.
as a domestic cat.
First
Often
reason
foraging
is that
in
some
cemeteries,
floors in this
but
building
for
are
Huang,
hardly used
perhaps
at
it was
night,
just
so they
a
don't
wild
turn on the
animal,
main
not
lights
enough
there
to
if
bother
the
him.
elevator stops.
In
It's
the
just a
deserted,
dark, empty
cold
space.
cemetery,
Secondly, the
there was
reflection
only
in those
one
metal
person's
walls
shadow.
can be misleading. The shape of
His
the
hands
elevator
were
can
stiff,
distort any
full of
movement.
veins.
And thirdly,
Quickly scooping up shovelfuls
sometimes
of dirt
strange
and
things
throwing
happen
them to
that
the
we
side.
can't easily explain. It doesn't
The
mean
alcohol
it's
as well as
supernatural.
the gold
It could
under
be
this grave
coincidence,
urged him more
electrical
than ever.
fault, or just me working
It was
too hard.
unclear how
I'm
many
not saying
hours
I
had
believe I'm
passed.
haunted.
His body
I
was
just know
soaked
that
with
experience
water because
left
the
me
rain
shocked
was pouring
since
down
then.
heavier
I've
and
mostly
heavier.
stayed away from that elevator.
He stopped
After
to wipe
work,
the
I
sweat
either
that
leave
was running
earlier
down
or
his
try and
forehead.
take the
He was
stairs.
panting
I
from
still work
exhaustion.
in the same
His
building.
clothes were
I
already
see the
covered
same
in mud.
hallways and the same
Feeling
sign
his
that
eyes
says
were
social
getting blurry,
elevators will be
Huang
turned
sat
off
down,
after 8 o'clock.
shaking his head vigorously a
PM,
few times,
but every time I
making
have
a
to take
cracking
the
sound.
service elevator late at night.
The scenery around him was
I
still
feel my
dark
chest
and hazy.
tighten. I feel a little
accompanied
scared
by gusts
before
of wind blowing like the sound of
You
a
said,
ghost lamenting and calling out
asked
to
me
people
if I
from
should
deep
stop or
underground.
continue. I was worried that
Huang
if I
looked
stopped
up
I
at the
might
sky.
regret it.
He
But
was
part of me
already in
felt
a
guilty at
rectangular
the thought
hole.
of ignoring someone who might
Huang
be in
muttered,
trouble eventually. My fear
"Just
overcame
tomorrow,
all my
my
worries.
life will
I gently
change.
pressed
I will
the
have money,
accelerator and
a
the
lot
car
of money."
started moving.
Forgetting the
Past him,
stench
I
of the
couldn't
corpse,
take my
he
eyes
took
off him
off
like
the
a
cloth
statue.
wrapped
Then,
around
as
his
soon as the
mouth
front
and
of my
used his
car
teeth
was
to bite
parallel
the
to him, he
flashlight.
tilted his head slightly,
He
as if
picked
he
up
was
Mr.
judging
High's
me. My
cold,
chest tightened
stiff,
so much I
gray
could hardly
hand and
breathe.
looked
The
at
whole
it.
moment felt heavy and
The
dense,
swollen
like time
fingers
had
made the
slowed
ring
down.
stick even tighter to the
Everything
bone,
happened in a
making
matter
Huang
of
struggle
seconds.
to
I
pull it
continued
out.
to move forward, and
The
my
more
car
he
had
tried to
completely
use
passed him.
force,
I glanced
the more
in
the
the rear
skin
view
on the
mirror.
dead man's
Immediately, my
hand
heart
peeled
was
off.
pounding. The
Piece
headlights
by piece.
illuminated the tree trunks, the grass
Squeak,
by the road,
squeak,
and a small section of hedge.
squeak,
The man was
squeak.
gone. That
Suddenly,
was what made me
Huang
shiver.
jumped
One
in
moment
surprise
he was there,
because
the
the
next
owls
moment
were
the place
flying
looked
up,
empty.
flapping
I
their
craned my
wings
neck,
in a
trying
panic,
to catch any
seeming
movement
to be
behind me,
afraid.
but I saw nothing.
Before he could regain his composure,
a shiver ran
he
down
dropped
my
the
arm.
flashlight
I took a
in
few
panic
shaky
when he
breaths.
discovered
my
a
mind
pair
tried
of
to
bright
make
eyes
sense of it.
staring at him from inside
Logically,
the coffin.
maybe he was out of sight,
Huang
or
gasped
maybe I
in
just
horror.
couldn't see him in the dark. But the
Wha-
suddenness of
what
everything
is
being there for a
that?
second then gone was
His
almost
face paled
impossible.
as he
At
looked
the same
towards
time,
those
I
red
knew there
eyes,
was no
his
evidence
hand
of anything
tremblingly
beyond
groping
that
for the
strangeness.
flashlight.
That didn't mean he was gone.
But before he could pick
But
it
it
up,
definitely
he
was. I
screamed
kept
out loud
driving,
when a
pressing
black
the
shadow
accelerator a
suddenly
little
rushed
harder than
towards
usual.
his
My
face.
eyes kept glancing
The
towards
cat
the
was
rear
like a
view mirror,
miniature
even
black
though I
panther,
wasn't sure what I
howling
expected
angrily
to
and
see. My
scratching,
palms were
causing
slippery on
blood
the
to
steering
flow
wheel.
down his
I wiped
face,
one hand
making
on
him
my
ache.
pants, then switched hands.
It was the
and did
first
same.
time he encountered such a
The
large
same
lynx.
with the other.
My
Huang
breathing
struggled
was
to
rapid,
resist,
and my pulse
until
was
he
pounding
grabbed the
in my
ferocious
ears. I
animal's
forced
neck.
myself to
He had
slow
to
my
use all
breathing
his
by
strength
counting
to
in my
throw
head
it to
to
the
the
ground
ground
a few
times.
more fields and patches
The
of
claws
trees.
sharper
I passed
than a
a
rusty
blade
barn
dug
and a
into
small
Huang's
cluster of
arm as if
sheds
wanting
near
to
the
tear his
driveway
skin
all of
into
them.
pieces. Dark and
He
quiet,
gritted
the
his
tension
teeth
in my
and
chest
squeezed
doesn't
tightly.
go away. I turn on the cabin
Its
light
growls
for a
gradually
second just to
became
feel
smaller,
glass alone, giving way to few seconds I turn it back off because it makes it hard to see outside from exhaustion about what I just saw. The man was to throw the large, heavy
his clothes
looked like they had been dragged across the ground,
using
and his eyes looked so intense I tried to reason maybe he was just a tramp or a lost person. But why was he staring like that? Why was he gradually darkened like a candle blown out by the wind and blended into the dark night? Answer about 10 minutes later, I came to a small gas station. Mr. High's corpse, but the parking lot had a few vending machines, and I drove and parked under a dim overhead light and turned off the engine. Thunder and lightning began to rumble violently, trying to get the feeling over the fluorescent giant centipede-shaped lightning. The buzzing and moths fluttering around, I realized I was hungry, but my nerves were so sensitive I didn't have Mr. High's hand to remove the remaining down. I climbed out of the car, but the ring stuck tightly and refused to come off. Grab a bottle of water. The air outside is damp and cool. Reached into his back pocket to find my hands are shaking a little as I unscrew Mr. High's hand. I take a long sip. The water feels good. He placed the dead man's still rumbling. I look back at the road on the mouth of the coffin to see a shadowy figure one by one, nothing creating a screeching sound of metal rubbing against bone.
of the vending machine. After was about to fall off, I get back in the car and start the engine. I take off down the highway again, determined to put more distance. Suddenly, me and that stretch of road, the black cat started to wiggle away with talk shows or some music to keep. Mr. High's body began to move, his fingers strong, but I eventually spreading out in Kwong's playing some old rock songs. The rest of his breath in tears, but I don't see anyone else on the side of the road. Every time I turn a corner, his face pale and bloodless, bracing myself, his body trembling as he gradually retreated. But before he could run away, gives way to a few scattered houses in the small intersection. There were flashing traffic lights as I reached that intersection. Immediately after that, a bolt of lightning struck down and I realized how stiff my shoulders were. I got home around. The rain poured down like a waterfall. The first thing I did was lock my car and check my rang out in horror. I usually don't worry too much face with cloudy eyes. I felt the need to be sure when I got in with hatred. I kicked off my shoes, put my luggage down and went straight to the bathroom to wash my face. The cold water. Kwong was panting as he tried to pull Mr. High's hand away. I saw my reflection in the mirror and saw that I looked very confused. My eyes were wide open. My face was a little pale. I didn't sleep well that night. Tightly and I kept imagining the man walking out towards my car. Help me, his eyes staring at me. Ghost, I woke up has entered my intestines. There was a rumbling, heart is pounding. The next day, I got up early, made some coffee, and tried to forget about it. I thought it was just one of those weird experiences on the road. Maybe I should call the local police station to report a suspicious person, but I didn't have a license plate or anything to give them. Scattering he didn't actually commit a crime. He was just there, and his mind spinning wildly. For the next few weeks, I avoided that route at night. In his dream, to go to work, he heard a ghostly laugh coming from Mr. High's coffin. Then a growling voice filled with resentment. Accompanied by the this time I left earlier in the afternoon, so I still had some daylight. As I went through the whole driveway, I was on the verge. My stomach was tight, and my hands couldn't relax on the wheel. As I got closer to where the sun was setting behind the water, woke Kwong. The water had almost filled the deep tree. I slowed down and glanced to the right of the road. There was no one there. The tree looked normal. Squinted his eyes and discovered Trong was also there. The other side of this place looks empty, but my heart is pounding. I feel a layer of sweat on my forehead. Good job. Despite the comfortable temperature, my legs are tense. His eyes lit up as he thought of a accelerator pedal ready to accelerate. If I catch a glimpse of anything down the hole, nothing happens. To avoid being discovered. Spot keeping pace and finally letting out a breath. Engrossed in shining the flashlight into the hole. He also wanted to take this a few more times. Since then I never saw that man again. I knew each time my pulse quickens and I feel a cold feeling in my gut. It doesn't make Mr. grave, but my mind pulls me back to that night. But now it's all standing there covered in grime. Kwong was startled when he heard Trong's voice. I replay the moment he put his face down in the water. What his intentions were. His friend's hand would he ask around for help, or would things have gone differently? I have no answers. All I have is the memory of that strange encounter. Trong only had time to scream out loud before losing his balance and falling into the deep hole. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Kwong hurriedly climbed to the edge of the hole. It was just a man, but there was something about him that was off. That was what made it so scary. He planned to stay on the shore, and if he saw Trong come up, Kwong would hold his head down and drown him. I still shiver when I think about it. Something unusual was happening down in remembering the way he looked at me. Trong's screams were trying to why I get so restless on country roads. Ghost. I don't usually share this story because it sounds like nothing happened. There's a ghost. But it was exactly that. Trong was struggling. It was just a person standing next to the edge of the hole, but someone had pulled him down. Like I was in serious danger. His hands were still trying to reach out for help. Struggling before sinking to the bottom of the grave. If I see someone standing on the side of the road, I slow down enough to get a better look, but I rarely. He was breathing heavily. His eyes wide open, but I don't want to have to find out the grave had now become a deep, intuition murky, is right. That foul-smelling water no dramatic ending swallowed all. I got home safe, and I never found out when they find Trong's body. All I know everyone will think that he caused this and died. The darkness and locked onto just me thinking the fear about it. I felt Kwong smiled contentedly. That feeling hasn't faded. But before he could stand up, he was startled when a large, round human head. I can almost feel my heart racing emerge from the water hole. Maybe it was just a random guy, or maybe it was something else. Mr. High, there was something else going on. I'll never really know, but that's why it felt so real, so vivid. There were no flashing lights or other signs, just a man on the side of the road. Ran away. That was all it took to shock me more than I'd like to admit. I never thought a few words on a wall, but it gradually became farther and farther away until the first day I walked into that basement studio. I felt sure I had found a hidden gem as he ran on the village road straight towards flowers blocking out the noise of the city. I wanted to dreamily practice
the sound of her dog barking, and then I found those messages and everything. Its 2 paws were scratching fiercely step by step. What happened the way I remember. I am not adding any fancy decorations or insights. I will just tell you what I did, what I saw, and how I felt at the time I discovered this place through an online ad. By someone softly calling her name. Photos of a cramped but comfortable room with exposed pipes on the ceiling and foam panels on some of the walls. It's me. The ad mentioned the door for me, cheap rent, hurriedly getting out of bed. About noise. When she reached the door, Lon suddenly hesitated. But my neighbors were always annoyed if I. What's wrong? Recorded late. Why are you here at this hour? Strong hallway. There are a few doors on the left, all closed, and pipes running along the ceiling. Money. We stopped at the last door. Inside it wasn't pretty, but there was enough room for my didn't understand what was going on. The walls were torn up a little, and a few cables were in the corner. There was a single overhead light with a fluorescent tube. Raised her hand to stop her. I could replace it. Why? If I wanted to, I would tap my foot on the concrete floor. Solid sound didn't travel far. This was exactly what I needed. I signed the lease a few days later. The price was low, and the manager seemed happy to finally have someone reuse the studio. He told me it had been empty for months. It's raining and windy like this. It didn't feel like a glamorous place, and it probably took a specific type of living to want a studio in the basement. I'll take care of you. I liked the isolation on my first official day as a tenant. I took the monitor and a few instruments downstairs. I also took cleaning supplies. While speaking, Kwong grabbed Lan's hand, and the floors needed to be cleaned, causing I wanted to get everything in order away, so I put my stuff down and knelt down to dust the corners of the room. I remember hearing my breathing. There's not much time left. It was a small space. We have to leave before dawn. I liked how real it felt. Kwong hurriedly explained. Studio environment. I was as if to reinforce the door when I saw those words written in necklace from his pocket and showed it to about knee-high. Did you hear his voice? At first I thought it was just some leftover graffiti. We're going to get married, and noticed the letters were shaky. Where did you get this necklace? Someone had written them in a hurry. Don't say I stole it. More like a question than a random phrase. I ignored it. I saw weirder things in the rehearsal space. People like to write nonsense on the walls. Don't worry about anything. But it just felt weird. But I focused on cleaning later. I'm scared. A few hours later, I had dusted off most of the dust. I set my monitors up on a sturdy table. Starting to feel uncomfortable, and I put my mic stand in a corner and put some cables in. Are you chasing me away? I checked everything out the place. What did you promise me? As advertised, the overhead light still flickers occasionally. We're going to get married. I tried tapping on the furniture, Kwong but that didn't hug his lover and pulled her out. I figured maybe I'd replace it later or bring a lamp. I'm screaming now. The next few days bringing in more instruments. Let me go. By the end of the week, I had everything. Lon clung to the door, a couple of guitars, the light switch, a small drum machine, and some chairs. As soon as the light was on, the environment was very quiet out the door. Despite Lon's slight noise from the ventilation ducts was from the caretaker, not the manager. The sound of a young man in waking up, who passed turning on the light and starting to run to her room. He was usually cleaning the hallways or ran away for fear of being discovered. He barely said anything, just nodded at me. I won't let you go, remember that. Then the night I stayed late, I'll come back to take you away. Recorded. The next night, the building was mostly empty, sitting by her daughter's bed. I got there around 6 a.m., set up the mic and started playing some loops. I don't understand notice anything out of nowhere for about an hour. She suddenly went crazy like this. I recorded a simple guitar part and tried out some lines. The husband looked at his daughter, who was in a coma. Her skin was pale. Through my headphones, and that's when I realized how quiet the hallway was. It's because you forbade their love affair at around 8:30 p.m. It's all your fault. I started packing. I walked towards the wall with the lights going out one by one. It's just because I'm worried about light flickering. I want her to get a good husband. Noisy, I flipped the switch and the room darkened, leaving a soft glow from the hallway light. And how did you go to the police station? My device. I noticed something on the floor near the desk. I knelt down with a red marker. The words "he saw you." Now, the police have investigated. Letters on last night, Kwong and Trong went to dig up Mr. Hai's grave to steal the gold. It suddenly spiked panic. Trong choked to death, and my heart was pounding. I looked around. His wife was still alone. I picked up a nearby rag and some spray cleaner, opened her mouth wide. The red marker smudged a little, but didn't come off. My hand shaking. Have they found him yet? The husband shook his head, watched like I wasn't alone in that basement. I rubbed harder, but the police found a gold necklace in his pocket. I picked up my phone and used the flashlight to scan the rest of the floor. I didn't see any other messages. The husband sadly checked the corners under the desk behind my equipment. Also died last night. A moment later, any footsteps or voices. The caretaker he was struck in the head by lightning. As far as I knew, I felt floating in Mr. Hai's breathing hard, and my palms were sweaty. I feel so sorry to get out of there. I turned off all the other lights, locked the door, don't come back to haunt my daughter anymore. Stairs. I didn't see anyone in the hallway or lobby. The building seemed deserted that night. I didn't sleep well. I tried to tell myself it was just some graffiti left, but I couldn't shake my thought that it looked new, as if someone had done it recently. No wonder my daughter said that last night she dreamed that in the morning I came back on the door than usual. I saw the caretaker.
When I turned on the light, caretaker I saw confused when I mentioned the writing. He just shrugged and said he didn't see or hear anything. I thought it was just black messages on the wall, unexpected a bit, but the words were still visible. The red marker on she was going crazy. Looked stubborn like it had stained her concrete. I knelt down, feeling cold as the wind howled, but it only where the edges of the letters, the shapes were still there. He saw my friend. She slowly opened her eyes when she saw a figure standing outside the window. My mind started to wander. Lon, who was he? Why would someone write like that? For the next few days I was busy with my music. I tried to ignore the marks, but they were always in the corner of my eye. Lon jumped up in panic and saw I moved my device so I didn't have to look at the writing on the floor other times, and his icy hand dragging her away. Over the words on the wall, she screamed in terror. I knew they were still there. The caretaker's reassurance her mind in a state of extreme panic. I kept thinking someone had a key or someone that was sneaking in whenever I took an afternoon off. Let me go. I decided to talk to the building manager again. Eerie laughter echoed throughout the night along with Lansdale. Found him in the small office next to the lobby. I told him about the article. He seemed surprised but calm. He said the last tenant was a musician, but that guy left months ago. He never complained or mentioned anything strange. The manager also insisted no one else had rented the space since he offered to lend me some paint to cover up the graffiti if I was offended. That's when I realized I was alone, no big explanation, just me and those words. I painted over the writing on the wall with a small can of white paint, mostly covering the black letters, but I could still see a faint outline if I looked closely. The FL floor was a bigger problem. I tried painting it too, but the red marker had soaked through first coat of paint. I did a second coat, although there is still a slight shadow of the letters if the light hits at the right angle. My nerves are on edge every time I walk into that place at night. The basement is colder. I started hearing these soft noises, the creaking in the pipes. The caretaker told me it was normal, just water still running. Whenever I heard them my stomach would turn and I would stop whatever I was doing to listen. I would wait for any sign of someone lurking around. Sometimes I would open the door to the hallway just to check no one was there. Every time the messages messed with my head. They were simple, but they fueled my imagination. Have you heard his voice? He seen you? It was like a warning or a question, but I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't sure if I should be worried about a stalker or if it was just random SC Rabies. I tried to focus on the music, but the stress made it hard to concentrate. My recording sounded lifeless. My mind wasn't in the right place. After a month I started dreading my visits. That basement smell made me feel claustrophobic. I noticed every flicker of the overhead lights. I found myself glancing over my shoulder even when the caretaker was nearby. I felt exposed, like the walls had eyes. I hated this. Feel like I would rent this space to create, not stress about strangers or mysterious notes. One evening I decided I had had enough. I packed my main gear, guitar, microphone, a small mixer. I left some cheaper stuff I planned to get back. My hands were shaking because I carried the boxes up the stairs. I kept listening for footsteps behind me. My scalp tingled every time I heard the echo of my own footsteps. When I reached the lobby, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The next morning I canceled the lease. I told the building manager I had found another location that fit my schedule. Better he didn't push it. He just said he understood and he would keep my deposit if I left before the end of the contract. I accepted that. I didn't want to argue. I wanted to get out of there. I went back one last time to get the rest of my stuff. The caretaker saw me in the hallway and asked if there was a problem. I said I just needed another space with more air. He nodded like he had heard that reason 100 times. I wondered if he suspected the real reason, but I didn't want to explain the messages again. I wanted to be done. As I walked into the office I saw the faint marks on the wall where I had painted them were almost unreadable now. The floor was covered with an old rug I had laid down. I folded the rug up and tucked it underneath. I caught a glimpse of the faint red letters one more time. It made my heart pound again. Hurriedly, as I carried the last box out, I took one last look at the empty room. The overhead light flickered. A low hum filled the silence. The smell of damp concrete lingered. My face was hot and I could feel my pulse in my neck. I locked the door behind me, walked away feeling relieved. No more scribbled words, no more strange chills, no more musty basement again. I told myself it was all just random vandalism by a previous tenant. Maybe some stressed out musician wrote nonsense on the wall. That explanation made sense. The manager said no one else was there, so maybe it was old, maybe it was ignored, until I realized the fear came from not knowing it was it. But still, every time I remember that red phrase I feel a knot in my stomach. He saw you. I can't explain why it bothered me so much, but it saw me. Never went back to that building. I don't have any ghost stories or evidence of intruders, maybe just the graffiti left behind, but I still remember the feeling of panic. My palms were sweaty, the way my eyes glanced, every shadow felt real to me, and that was enough to make me leave
That's my story, no dramatic ending, no revelation, just a studio in the basement, weird words on the wall, and I walked away before anything worse happened. Some people might laugh at that, but I don't care. I still don't want to see those words again. I still remember that night with absolute clarity. We were on our way home from a barbecue. It was almost midnight and there were no street lights around, the only light coming from my headlights cutting through the darkness. My heart was still pounding from the noise and joy at the party, but there was also something else that I couldn't explain. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The asphalt seemed endless and I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. My name is Mark. I was driving my old car, a late 90s model. It had done some mileage, but it had never given me serious problems. I had recently changed the battery and had the alternator checked a few months before. I trusted that car. It got me through sea and a few road trips without much trouble that night, although it would show a side that I hadn't seen. My friends Alex and John were with me, Alex in the front passenger seat, John in the back. The three of us had spent the day at a friend's house having a barbecue. We had eaten too much and probably had more to drink than we should have, but I felt stable enough to drive. I didn't tipsy, I was just tired. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard and it read 11:48 p.m. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I could smell the lingering smoke from the grill on my clothes. The windows were rolled up and the cabin felt a little stuffy. I turned on the aircon, but it only blew out moderately cool air. After a while Alex started talking. He told a joke about one of our acquaintances, a guy we all knew from town. This acquaintance was known to be very religious. He always carried a small religious book in his pocket and he didn't drink or party. Alex said something like, I bet he would quote verses to us if he was there tonight. I laughed a little. John chuckled from the back seat. We didn't mean it in a bad way, just teasing. But then Alex pushed it further. He started mocking the friend's beliefs, imitating his seriousness. The tone, we all laughed, but deep down inside I felt a little uncomfortable, even though right then, maybe in the middle of Alex's joke, there was something had happened to the car. Lights, overhead lights flickering even though it was not on, was set to door. We were driving home from a gathering, and John made a joke about a friend believing in premonitions. The group laughed, but as soon as the word premonitions was uttered, the dashboard lights flickered. The radio screen went black for a second, the air conditioner fan dimmed, and the headlights dimmed so much that the road ahead almost disappeared. A shiver ran down my spine. Alex gripped the armrest, and John was silent. I tried to act calm, but I couldn't deny the unease. There was no curb or gas station in sight, so I decided to keep driving. No one said anything. The engine hummed steadily, but I was aware of every little sound, the squeal of the accelerator, the rattle of the air conditioner vents. My heart was beating faster than usual, my mind stuck in the moment. After a few minutes of silence, Alex said, "This is weird. It happened right when we were joking about it." I shrugged, trying to say it was a coincidence, but I didn't believe it myself. John muttered, "That's weird." He seemed shaken, despite trying to sound tough. Alex joked again, "Is God punishing us?" He laughed, but his tone was strained. At that moment, the car shook violently. The headlights were so dim I thought we'd lost them. The engine wheezed as if it were about to die. The dashboard went dark, save for the faint glow of the hazard lights. I gripped the wheel, my eyes glued to the darkness ahead. Sweat poured down my forehead. Alex cursed, and John shouted, "What the hell?" Then everything went back to normal. The engine started up again, the headlights came on, the dashboard flickered,